It being just a little past 8:30 a.m., we'll go ahead and call to order the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors for November 2nd, 2021, the continuation of the 2022 budget session. The county clerk has confirmed the roll, and we do have a quorum this morning. So we'll move on to the first items, which are the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by Supervisor Powers. If you could please all stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America, to the
republic for which it stands,
nation,
one nation under God,
God, liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
Now the invocation by Supervisor Powers.
Creator of all things, lover of all humankind, we ask for your guidance in the presentations and deliberations of the Winnebago County budget. Help us remember life is short, and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts and to meet the needs of those who travel this way with us. Remind us to be swift to love and to forgive and to make haste to be kind. Amen.
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 Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next item on the agenda is a motion to adopt this morning's agenda. For that, I'll call on Supervisor Albrecht.
He's muted.
I move to adopt this morning's agenda.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt this morning's agenda. Any discussion? We'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion carries. Moving on down to the next item, and that's the time during each meeting in which we give an opportunity for the public to speak on any item on the agenda or any item under county jurisdiction. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak today? If so, just go ahead and raise your Zoom hand and I'll call on you in succession. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Give them a little more opportunity just to make sure. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? Seeing none, we'll close that portion of the agenda. We'll move on to the next item, which is reports from committees, commissions, and boards. Any reports from any committees, commissions, and boards? I see one. I'll call on Supervisor Ellis. Please go ahead, Supervisor Ellis.
Thank you, Cheryl. I just called Kathy Geiner from Parkview Health Center, and she said that Parkview Health Center is #1 in the state by Newsweek as a #1 nursing home in the state.
Thank you, Supervisor Ellis. That's certainly wonderful news to hear. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Are there any other reports from committees, commissions, and boards? Seeing none, we'll close that portion of the agenda and we'll move down to County Board Chairman's report. Nothing really new to report from yesterday because I reported yesterday evening, but just to make sure everyone's on the same page. So just as a reminder, if any county board supervisor has a budget amendment that they would like considered at our budget amendment time tomorrow, you can start working with finance at any time for that. So if you know you're going to do that, please reach out to anyone from finance today so that they can start crafting the amendment verbiage and working with you on the specific line items, adding or deleting certain funding in the budget. And just as a reminder, as the process. So today we'll continue with reviewing the budgets where we left off yesterday evening. That means we'll start this morning with finance, then go to the county board and scholarship fund budget. Then we'll continue on the budget, the budget reviews as on the agenda for actually November 2nd meeting, starting with airport after that and continuing to highway until we get through all of the departmental budgets. If for some reason we didn't get through all the departmental budgets, then that would mean we would continue with those reviews at 8:30 tomorrow morning. I don't anticipate that happening, but if that was the case, that's what we do. If we get through with all departmental budgets today as we expect, then that would mean we would reconvene tomorrow at 4 p.m. to consider the budget amendments and the final adoption of the budget. Please remember that in terms of those amendments, while you can start now, we have kind of set a timeline and ask you to have those to finance by tomorrow at 10 a.m. At the latest. And that's because that gives finance an opportunity to be able to craft them, put them all together, and distribute them to all of you and the public tomorrow afternoon, I believe by 2 p.m. if I'm not mistaken. In regards to that. So just wanted to make sure everyone's on the same page with that process. Very good. Any questions for me about the budget process before we move forward?
I have a question.
Please go ahead, Supervisor Fari.
You said distribute. I assume that will be done by email?
Yes, they will also be, I believe, on the county website as well. We did that last year where we published them on the county website as well. That way it gave an opportunity for the public to be able to see them as well.
Alrighty. And also yesterday you assigned me a hand. I would appreciate if you do that again. Mine don't seem to want to stay up there, so.
Absolutely. And if we have a discussion at any point, all I'd ask you to do then is to open up your mic and state your name, and I'll call on you.
Thank you.
You're certainly welcome, Supervisor.
And good morning, by the way, Dr. Amos. How are you?
You as well. Thank you. And then the only other thing I should add about today is we will break for lunch. That would be approximately, hopefully a little before noon. It's County Government Day, if you didn't know as well, but of course, we're doing most of this virtually, as you can understand. But I will take the opportunity to speak with some of the students as well over the noon hour and give them a flavor of what we do with county government and county board more specifically. We will break a little before noon or so, and then the intent would be that we'd reconvene at approximately 1:15 in the afternoon. So just so everyone, once again, is on the same page with our time. Very good. Any other questions then? Okay, very good. So we will go ahead and continue with our departmental budget presentations as we were doing yesterday. So we'll next start with the finance department, which includes general services, miscellaneous, unclassified, and debt service. It starts on page 163. And I'll go ahead and ask the county executive, Executive Damel, if he wants to provide any overview on the finance budget before we call on the finance director.
I don't think I'd do any better job than Director Fitzgerald will do, so I'll just hand it right off to her.
Very good. Director Fitzgerald, any highlights you want to provide on the finance budget?
Yes, good morning. I did want to highlight on page 169, that is a list of my significant changes. And you'll note that the labor area had changed, and that was due to in May of 2021. I reorganized my department. I added an accountant. I deleted or removed an accounting supervisor and changed that to a budget manager position. So that was already approved, but it was after the 2021 budget was adopted, and that was done in May. So that will be the significant change in addition to the 3% increase that we budgeted for this year.
Very good. Thank you, Director Fitzgerald. We'll open it up for any questions in regards to the finance budget. I see a couple hands. First, I'll call on Supervisor Schellinger, followed by Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So your department has taken on a lot of new responsibilities with, I see that, the CARES Act being, the Routes to Recovery Grant being in your 2021 accomplishments. I'm assuming we have a lot of, a lot more funding through ARPA and things like that coming this year. It looks like you have a lot of goals and objectives in addition to sort of the regular things that we see. How full is your team with work to do, and do you think you have enough staff to make sure that we're doing the most we can with these opportunities?
That's a great question. First off, our staff was very lean before this, and that is why I did that change in May, because we already had taken care of the CARES Act monies, which was very time consuming. With the ARPA money, I know that County Executive Damo is working on a plan to have our strategic plan put forth, and then our priority-based budgeting, where he's hoping to have somebody come in and help us do that, and then also manage the ARPA funds. At this point, if we had to do that as well, I think our plate would be very overwhelmed. We did just have an announcement that our assistant finance director is going to be moving to Parkview to take over Tom Geski's job as finance manager there, who is retiring. So that's going to be a big loss for us too, that we're going to have to take on that load that he's been doing for over 20 years here. So I think at this point, we'd be very overwhelmed taking care of the $33 million as well.
Okay, so so maybe this is a question for the executive then. Is there a position in this budget that is managing ARPA funds?
There was a packet that I released to all the supervisors that went to P&F committee about an ARPA analyst, as well as strategic plan and and priority-based budgeting. So I believe everybody on the board got that packet.
There's nothing in this budget. This budget doesn't propose any position, anything to manage the ARPA funds.
Correct, because we're going to use the ARPA funds to help fund managing the ARPA funds. So we didn't want to attach it to the budget. The budget was more for our daily operations and what we normally do as a county. ARPA is above and beyond that, a chance for us to make a great significant impact within our community. So I wanted to make sure that that was separately allocated. And then why I wanted to have an analyst come in so we can really coordinate with all our communities, make sure we're getting the most amount of collaboration out of it and really listening to everyone.
Yeah, so to me, this feels more like the drip, 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 where we don't have a plan, where we continue to hear one thing after the next about positions without the county board really being fully looped in, I think, to what's going on. I think this budget needs a position that is going to be managing this process, or at least make sure that we have the capacity to handle $32 million of spending in addition to what we're already doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Schellinger. Next, I'll call on Supervisor Bender, followed by Supervisor Ellis. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
Just a little information on the packet. The packet was actually going to have a person working in the county exec's office working on the ARPA funds, but the meeting before, the county executive said he was going to form a committee, and Vicky and Joe Rasmussen were going to be on it. And then we went to a seminar, and then we switched gears to hiring some firm to manage our ARPA money. And I'm not in favor of anybody managing that ARPA money without a committee first. The county board knows what this county needs, and we need to be involved in it. We need to help make the decisions, because in the short end of it, the county board is the only one that can authorize spending that ARPA money. The county exec cannot spend one penny of that ARPA money without our approval. My question to Vicky would be, if we added one or two more positions to her office on a temporary 1 or 2 year term, would your office be capable of then handling the ARPA money? The cost for that packet was $350,000. I would think we could bring a couple accountants into that office for significantly less than $350,000.
If I could respond to that, the information
I'd like
was
Vicky to respond first, John. You can respond after Vicky, because that's who I asked. I didn't ask you.
Oh, okay.
We'll have Director Fitzgerald first, and then we'll have Executive Damo. Please go ahead, Director Fitzgerald.
Okay. Yes, I'm sure we could handle that, but I know there's a direction that County Executive Damo would like us to go forward with, because we don't have a strategic plan, and we don't know what programs are a priority. But if it was in my office, yes, we could manage it, but as long as we're doing those goals that County Executive has put forward.
And just out of reference, Vicky, most times county plans come from county supervisors. That's the way it's worked in the 6 years I've been on the board. We didn't hire a consulting firm to make a plan for Winnebago County. You have 36 supervisors in 36 districts that know what this county needs. And if there's going to be a plan drawn up, it should be the 36 supervisors that are involved in drawing a plan up. Now I'd be happy to listen to your comments, John.
Please go ahead, Executive Damo.
Sure. The position itself is out of my office, but it was working hand in hand with finance. It was never something for me to control or direct. It was literally something to help us get together with all communities, not just the 36 supervisors, but all the town chairs too, of all the municipalities that are within the county. We have to work with all of those governments in unison, as well as reaching out to the state and federal levels to see what we can collaborate with them. It was never about control. It was never about me picking priorities. It was precisely because of that. We cannot make decisions based on what's important to me or what's important to you. It has to be on what's important to all of us. It was simply a position to help manage all of that, to make sure that we weren't breaking rules. Whereas had we had done that committee meeting first off without publicly noticing it, we would have been breaking a rule. I want to make sure that we are following this to the T. And it was a 151-page packet. It was very well explained in there.
Thank you.
And I guess I would like to follow up on that. Do you plan on starting that committee sometime in the near future so we can do the ARPA funds and get the finance department on board? Because 2 months ago, you told us that you were going to put Vicky and Joe Rasmussen on the committee, and then that was the last we've heard of it. You know, when do you figure you'll select your committee so we can start moving forward with the ARPA funds? A lot of City of Oshkosh already has a plan.
You're right, a strategic plan. They sure do. Correct.
Any idea when your committee will be formed?
I'm not prepared to announce that now, but we need to get moving. The time is going past.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Next, we'll call on Supervisor Ellis, followed by Supervisor Norton. Please go ahead, Supervisor Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want Vicky to kind of explain something. When we go to bonding, hey, what connection, hey, our reserve has for bonding and things like that. There's a few people that are like I think there's 9 that are just setting on for the 2-year term right now, that if we go back out to bonding for, like we did that $4 million, hey, what goes into that in to make bonding at a decent rate? I mean, for interest rate and things like that.
Thank you, Supervisor Ellis. In the section on page 573, that's where our debt service starts, but we have a separate fund that we put our bonding into that we service our debt from. We only use the undesignated general fund balance when we do something special, like last year, we did an amendment for $2.9 million to pay off callable bonds. We can choose to use the general fund balance versus bonding, but if we choose to bond, it's a separate levy. And it's a levy that we don't have limits on as long as we have a 3/4 board vote. So when we go out for bonding, we have to get the approval of the board with a 3/4 vote. And we then set a debt levy for the taxpayers over their equalized value. This year, we were able to, with that $4 million borrowing, bring our debt levy down by 8 cents. And we can continue to take that debt levy from the lower amount and sustain it, or even continue to drop that. So we look at that before we decide what we're going to bond each year. But we also look at our 5-year capital improvement plan, and we see what's being planned, what we need to fund, and how we're going to fund it, whether it's bonding or not. At this time, we had such low rates that it made sense to bond short term so that we could get our debt levy rate down, but keep it from dropping drastically, and at the same time use general fund balance for highway projects and so forth. So we really strategically look at that each year, see where our fund balance is at for the general fund, and also see what the rates are at. And I believe our rate was around 0.39% that we were able to borrow that $4 million at, which was phenomenal. We decided to take advantage of those rates. Does that answer your question, Supervisor Ellis?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Vicki. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Ellis. Next speaker is Supervisor Norton, followed by Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vicki, following up on what Supervisor Schellinger said, have you ever been solicited from companies or firms that track grants? The reason I ask this because when I was at the NACO convention in Maryland this summer, there was a company there who would track your grants and fully. And I guess if they track grants, they could also help us with ARPA funds. And I guess I kind of agree a little bit with Supervisor Schellinger, but instead of hiring a position and then laying off this position in a couple of years, could we not contract with a firm like that? Or, in general, maybe Missouri has this new government center that could help us out. So I guess my general question is, have you ever been solicited from any of these firms that would track our grants to maybe help with grants in general and or ARPA funds? Thank you.
Okay, it was a little muffled, so I'm going to hope that I answer your question. What I think your question was, you were asking if I've been solicited by outside firms to help us manage ARPA funds or other grants. Is that correct, Supervisor Norton?
Yes, yes, basically yes.
Okay, I have not personally been solicited by them. I'm not sure if the county executive's office has been. I do know there are some firms out there that will help manage it. I know that our auditors, Clifton, Larson, Allen, had mentioned something about that when they came in to talk about last year's audit, but I have not been personally contacted by anyone for that, but I know that that does exist.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen. You can go ahead and unmute your mic, Supervisor Eisen.
Muted.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Fitzgerald, what is the timeline to spend that $16 million going forward? I know that there is a timeline for spending the total cash.
Yeah.
What is the timeline?
2026.
Yes, Supervisor Eisen, with this, we have 16.7 million in the bank right now, and we will get the other next May. So it'll be 33 million and some. And we have until December 31st of 2024 to commit the funds, whether by contract or purchase orders and so forth. And then we have until 2026 to actually expend the funds.
Okay, I was concerned with the idea of establishing the strategic plan and experiencing what goes into planning and the county board. This better helps me understand and put this in perspective so that this may not be pants on fire type of situation that we have to include it in the budget. I thank you very much for that explanation.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. I'll call on Supervisor Schellinger. Please go ahead, Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you. Are we also taking the unclassified section?
Yes, we are. Yes.
So I just want to ask about on page 566 under travel object 52000 leadership training. This looks like a new category for the unclassified budget. I'm curious. We had a discussion yesterday with human resources about leadership training or supervisor management training. I was just wondering if we could learn a little bit about how what this $15,000 is for, how or if it relates to that other training. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Fitzgerald?
Yes, thank you. I put that in there because we are going to be doing some department head training overall as a retreat. And I will ask County Executive Damel to maybe elaborate on that.
Sure. Yeah, it's exactly what it is. It's leadership training for our department heads so that we can get to work with each other a little bit more. One of those may be reaching out to UW Extension and doing a True Colors training so that we can communicate better with each other. Make sure that our communication is strong within department heads so we're not missing opportunities to collaborate. It's really to bring us together as one shared mission and one county government.
Okay, so I see the travel budget, but is there also a budget for the actual training?
We think we can get it done with that. We think that's all inclusive.
Okay, so is it a best practice for our accounting to have a training as travel?
Yes,
go ahead.
Dr. Fitzgerald?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, because we put all the registration, tuition for conferences and so forth on a separate line. We just lumped this together, but that is part of the travel category.
Okay.
In our accounting.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Supervisor Schellinger. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and conclude the finance budget. We'll move on to the 14th departmental budget. So that's the last one on the page from yesterday. So that's the county board budget and scholarship program. Starts on page 551. And then some highlights specifically are on page 554. I can go over that really quickly. Essentially what you'll see is that the budget is very similar to last year. A couple highlights. Number one, you'll see under professional services, there's a reduction of 10,000. That's because last year was actually 20,000. So actually there's still money there that in the past there wasn't, but that's for the combined in-person, where as an example, we had Lighthouse Productions come and assist us. We know there's the possibility we still may need some of that in 2022, but the thought is we would need less of that in 2022 than we did over this year. And then you'll see some changes related to technology. And just to make you all aware, we are looking at replacing all the county board supervisor iPads in 2022, and then to begin to start a rotation cycle every 3 to 4 years or whatever IT thinks makes most sense on a rotation basis afterward. Those iPads, however, you don't see in the county board budget, and because that's going to be in the technology replacement fund budget. So you don't see money related to that or related expenses related to iPad, because once again, we're going to replace them all, and those will be related to the IT technology. Otherwise, it's very similar to last year, just some minor up and down based on prior years or year-to-date actuals that we had when we were finalizing these budgets in August. So I'll open it up for questions. See a couple. So first I'll call on Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this the time to discuss the scholarship program?
Certainly can.
Okay, and probably Jerry Finch would be the one who'd know this more quickly than anybody else, because he was so much in favor and behind the scholarship. But how many years has it been in existence, and has it ever increased in the amount that we give students?
Supervisor Finch, do you have an idea of how long it's been?
Yeah, it's been like about 6 years now, 5 years. And I guess the main thing was we have a $9,000 scholarship fund, $1,000 for each school. Therefore, they have to do XYZ, whatever the case may be, to have the shot at the $1,000 scholarship. It's, in my opinion, it's one of the nicest things that Winnebago County can do for our children who wants to educate themselves further. So that's about it. I mean, I'm just grateful that the county went along with me for this idea so we could do something for our children.
I think
Thank
it's a
you,
great
Supervisor.
idea too. I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great idea too. I'm just wondering if it's only been 6, I thought it was longer than 6 years, but
10
if
years.
it's been 10 years. Okay. I think it might be time for us to think about increasing that scholarship because college costs have gone up dramatically in 10 years and that scholarship stays the same. And I just wondering if there are others on the board who might have thought about this, that perhaps the scholarship could be increased.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. I've heard that from time to time as well over the years in terms of a possibility of an increase. Thank you. Next, I'll call on Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Norton. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the traditional efforts that I've put through over the years is comparing and contrasting the Winnebago County Board the operating expense and per diem and travel expenses attributed to the county board. And our budget indicates that for 2022, $383,809 is to be allocated for the expenses of running the business of the county board. Now, our neighbor to the north that has just a few thousand more population and a vibrant airport bringing in big bucks. The Outagamie County Board allocation for 2022 is $655,448. They're taking 65%. Well, we're spending 65% less than they are to do the same job with 38 supervisors. I think that we should all give ourselves a pat on the back and continue in this tradition. Or maybe you want to double our per diem so we can spend as much as them. But I don't think that that's a good choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next, we'll call on Supervisor Norton, followed by Supervisor Finch. Please go ahead, Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have you and the county executive ever thought about talking about leadership programs, contributing some in the budget to allow someone or individuals from this county, either the county board of supervisors or who are employed by the county, to be either part of the NACO leadership program, which I think some of us got an email that's starting up. It's every year. It's a program that was started by Colin Powell, or the WCA program. So I'm saying, if we're talking about leadership programs for department leaders, there's one that can take advantage of now with NACO, but we can also take advantage. So that's my general question.
Yeah, it's a good question, actually, Supervisor Norton. The honest answer is yes in the past, no at budget time, but should have, in my view, and had thought about it after budget. So the answer is at budget time had not, even though had prior to that and since then. It's a very good point. That's worth considering. Others have brought that up over the years. And I do think there could be value in doing that. The answer is it's not in this budget, had thought about it before and after. Does that answer your question, Supervisor Norton?
Yes, I did, yes.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Supervisor Finch. Please go ahead, Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've had this scholarship program for a good number of years, and everything has gone up. I was just wondering what the county board feels as far as raising the dollar amount to the 9 individuals to help them get through school. So I guess that's where I'm coming from. You know, we try to help everybody, whatever, because these same kids could be the same kids sitting in our chairs 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. And I think this is one thing that we can do for our children, is to help them get their education and go further. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Next, I'll call on Supervisor Powers.
Supervisor Finch's question, I had in mind 1,500 instead of 1,000, because it hadn't been raised. Ideally, it should be raised a little bit every year, but since we haven't, I was thinking in terms of 1,500 instead of 1,000.
I'll second that motion.
Now, we're not taking any amendments right now, but if anyone wants to add something about any line item, whether it's scholarship or the training, they would have an opportunity to add an amendment that we would then consider tomorrow afternoon. So you would have that opportunity to consider that if you chose to add amendments. So, thank you. I'll call on Supervisor Norton, followed by Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the scholarship program, I do want to add, and the committee, the extension knows about this. Over a year ago, I asked if they could expand it, eligibility. And what I meant by this, I would hope, my wish was that they expanded to open up to non-traditional students. They could work out the details if you only get one scholarship per lifetime, whatever. But I think that so many individuals I know, they didn't know about it until after they got out of high school. So what I would like to see, and I think Supervisor Snyder and his committee is looking at it, if they can look at it, about expanding the eligibility to at least letting the non-traditional student, those who are not in high school, to apply for the scholarship. So that's my only suggestion. I hope maybe we get updates soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Norton. Next, I'll call on Supervisor Bender, followed by Supervisor Wingren. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
I'd just like to say to Supervisor Powers that I would be more than happy if she wants to write an amendment to go on as support. I've already got 3 amendments in, so I don't want to write another one, but I would be willing to support anybody that would be willing to write one for a $1,500 9 scholarships. I think it's a great idea, and I think at today's cost of college, we need to do a little bit more to get the kids educated so we have good workforce out there when they graduate.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Next speaker is Supervisor Wingren, followed by Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment. First of all, this has been done for almost 20 years, not 5. Be careful what you wish for. Although this is a fine program, to expand the amount or the number, I think would be wrong. We are taking money from a taxpayer. And we're saying to John Henry, who's unemployed, working maybe, all kinds of trying to put his kid through college. Now we're taking his tax money and giving it to his neighbor who might not need the financial help. So be careful what you wish for. This is the wrong time. Keep what you got, but don't mess with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren. Next, we'll call on Supervisor Shorsey, followed by Director Fitzgerald. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And maybe Vicky is logging in or raising her hand to clarify this. I don't know about you, but I'm a little confused. On page 553, it talks about the scholarship fund. And basically the tax levy will remain the same, no change from 2021 to 2022, no change from 2021. In 2022, the scholarship payments will increase from 1,000 to 2,000 per recipient, which will increase each semester payment from $500 to $1,000. So that says to me, there was a decision to increase those payments, but I may be a little confused about this.
Sure, no,
And-
that's not. Director Fitzgerald, do you want to answer?
Yes, that is correct. That is why I raised my hand as well, Supervisor Shorzy, is because we did increase it to 2,000. And I believe, we did that in the meetings. But now we are giving out 5 $2,000 scholarships.
If Chairman Ramos, may I comment on that?
Please go ahead, Executive Damo.
Yeah, when we talked about it at the meeting, one of the things that we found last year is Sue Ertmer, our county clerk, was having a hard time getting applications for the scholarships. What we did is we give out 18 scholarships, $500 per student, 2 per school. We were practically begging to get applications in. So what we decided in the meeting was between me and Chairman Ramos is maybe a $2,000 scholarship would be more
for me.
impactful. And if we did it for 5, it'd be more competitive. And it'd be more of sorry, somebody else is unmuted there.
Yeah, we're gonna skip that. How many seasons are there?
I'm attempting to
What are
mute.
they?
If you could please mute your mic if you're not speaking. Thank you.
So the idea and the decision point to look in if you guys are going to do an amendment is if that's agreeable to you, 5 $2,000 scholarships that'd be more impactful that we can open up countywide, or if you want to stick to the $1,000 per school and split it up to $500 scholarships for 18. And the thought was because Sue let us know that there was a challenge getting applications for the scholarships this year.
Thank you, Executive Damo. I'll call on Supervisor Powers. Please go ahead, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may be relating rumor and not fact, but I felt that there was a time when we did not hand out all the scholarships, and what wasn't handed out got sort of usurped into the budget. And if we keep at 10 and we can't get 10 one year, but maybe we've got 12 or 13 the next year, that money would hold over and not get sucked back into the general fund. But it would be earmarked for scholarships. And it may also be that by doing that, knowing that it was saved for scholarships, there could be businesses out in Winnebago County who might want to contribute to scholarship fund, knowing that if it didn't get handed out in 2021 or 2022 or 2023, that it wouldn't just get eaten up in another budget line, and would be available at the time when we might have a large number of kids requesting a scholarship. Am I right that this money, if it didn't get spent, it has been sort of sucked up in the past?
I'll call on our finance director, Director Fitzgerald, but we do have a little bit of a fund balance for the scholarship fund, but I'll have Director Fitzgerald clarify that. Please go ahead, Director Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chairman Remus. We do not put that back in the general fund. Anytime that's not used, we have an assigned fund balance just for scholarships, and it's currently at $49,292. So we do have a reserve just for the scholarships, whatever's not used, or any extra monies that are made on interest from our investments for the scholarships, stay with that scholarship fund, and it's separated out in the general fund. So we do have a bank of $43,292.
Well, in that case, my feeling would not be to drop it to 10 kids, I mean to 5, but rather leave it at where leave it there. And if we only have 5 who request it, they get the money. And in a couple of years, there could be 18 or 19. I mean, I don't know. There could be a big number of kids one year who ask. With COVID, we don't know what's going to happen. So there could be a lot of people requesting funding. I would not like to see us drop the number of scholarships we've given, but I would like to see us increase the amount. And if there was already an idea for 2,000, then I'm going to withdraw my 1,500 and go with 2,000, but keep it at the 9 scholarships at least. And if they don't get used, then we hold off if there's a year that there are a lot of students asking, we increase it, knowing that we've got some scholarships we didn't hand out one year that we could roll over and give it the next year or a next year or a next year.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. And just so everyone's on the same page, with the budget, what we're really doing is how much we decide to allocate to the scholarship fund this year. How many you actually distribute and which amount isn't technically what you're voting on when you voted on the budget. You're voting on how much money you are actually going to allocate to the scholarship fund for 2022. So just to make sure that everyone's on the same page in regards to that. Next, I'll call on Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have had the privilege back in the day to serve on the scholarship committee, particularly back in 2006 to 2008. And at that time, the scholarship was designed and marketed to appeal to the average student. You had sophisticated systems for scholarship application and recipients, and you had to have a super good grade point average and a lot of school-spirited activities to obtain those scholarships. This particular scholarship, which Winnebago County offered, was designed to appeal to get students to become involved and interested in county government. It wasn't just, throwing money out the window so that we could assist 9 students. However, as this program evolved, the scholarship committee was dissolved and the functions of the committee were given to the extension, UW extension. At that point, the scholarship became far more sophisticated. Back in the day, the committee members were the ones that read the papers that the scholarship competitors wrote. And, they weren't very sophisticated writings, and we were fortunate to get enough people to apply so that we could distribute those scholarships at the schools and to homeschool students. Now, today, this has evolved into a very sophisticated process, a bureaucratic process, if you please, where the UW extension sets very high standards for the writings and selects those students that their professors that read the treaties decide for. So I'm kind of sharing a perspective on where this scholarship program came from and where it's going. And I don't know that increasing the amount is going to be a big factor simply because you have such sophisticated students applying and competing for that scholarship that this is probably just one of half a dozen scholarships that the competitive student acquires over the time. I like the old days when you could have the C student get that scholarship, but I haven't looked at the work that current applicants for the last several years have submitted, but I'm sure it's not an average student. You're getting the cream of the cream or picking up these dollars. Oh, somebody's smiling at me and waving his hands. He's got something to say. I'm gonna let Tom Snyder tell us more because he's affiliated with
I've been
UW
associated
Fox
with
Valley.
that. I've been associated with UW Extension for quite a few years, and to my knowledge, it may have been before my coming to the UW Extension Committee, but the committee members were never tasked with reading these things in my tenure. But what we did was we just took in all the applicants, removed their identifying information, and sent them to UW Fox, well, at that time, UW Fox Cities English department. And they would go over each one and judge them on their content and structure. And then it went in that regard. And since the extension is no longer involved and it's gone to the county board and the county clerk's office, I'm not sure exactly if anything's changed, but I would think not.
Thank you, Supervisor Snyder, and thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next, we'll call on Supervisor Brunn.
I would just like to say that this is an opportunity for us to promote what the county board does. I think we failed that in this area. It is probably best if we would have somebody or a committee that would go to the different schools and promote this. Simply just having it on the website and sending a mailing, that's why we don't get enough applicants. I think the money is fine, but I think we need to promote it better and to have a purpose and really explain what the purpose of this is. And I also of the opinion that it would be better if we could keep it to the schools that are in Winnebago County where the colleges are, rather than sending it to someone that's going to Ohio State or University of Minnesota. We have UW Fox here, we have UW Oshkosh, we have Fox Valley Technical Schools, and we support them with our tax dollars and with our committees, but yet we go beyond that. So my opinion is we need a committee that would be promoting this and also giving some guidelines to it. The money, I think, is fine. My son benefited from this approximately 9 years ago, 10 years ago, and it wasn't very time consuming for him. He had other scholarships as well. So only reason I found it is because Nancy Barker and I had a discussion on my way to work one day. And she told me that I should have my kids do it, and it worked. But it needs to be promoted better and needs a better purpose. I think the money is just fine, and we can do what we want with that. And like it has been discussed that we're just allotting the amount now. The committee could figure out what they want to do with how they want to divide it, rather than having more money put into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Brunn. Next speaker is Supervisor Snyder, followed by Supervisor Finch. Anything further, Supervisor Snyder? And you need to unmute your mic, Supervisor Snyder.
No, I thought I had lowered my hand, so.
Very good. Thank you, Supervisor Snyder. Next speaker is Supervisor Finch, followed by Supervisor Gabbard. Please go ahead, Supervisor Finch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the scholarship program goes, I'm gonna take some credit for it because I felt back then that we should be helping everybody, not just whatever. And the scholarship program started out very well. And then, in my opinion, the politics took over where this, that, and whatever. The idea of it in the beginning was you have 9 schools. Each school has the opportunity of a $1,000 scholarship. And how it went the other way, I really can't answer that question. But the point is, back when we first started, we also went to the schools and talked to the schools about the $1,000 scholarship. And now we do nothing. So I don't know. I think we should go back to educating the schools that we have a $1,000 scholarship for each school and take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Next speaker, Supervisor Gabbard, followed by Supervisor Gordon. Please go ahead, Supervisor Gabbard.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Here's a couple of caveats to the scholarship program. The Winnebago County Credit Union out on Snell has a flyer and applications out there for the kids, which I thought was a good take. And I have run into recently a conversation with a couple of kids that go to Winneconne High School. And I said, you should apply for it because it doesn't take much of your time. You're both good with your words, and just apply for it. It's $1,000. It would save your parents that much money. And they made mention to me that the second page asks for all your extracurricular activities. And these 2 kids happen to be of the nature that they aren't in a lot of extracurricular activities because they work 3 jobs saving for school. So they felt if they filled out the application, they probably wouldn't be looked at very highly because they didn't have a lot of extracurricular activity. I told them to apply anyway. There's no names involved, and perhaps whoever is reading these and looking at these would also think, well, there must be a reason why they aren't in a lot of extracurricular activities. And then the other point is back in my history, which is umpteen million years ago, as a high school student that wanted to go to college and be the first in my family to go to college and graduate, I applied for every scholarship that was available. I asked the counselors at the school, is there anything I can apply for? Where is their knowledge of what I can apply for? I applied for everything, and I happened to get a scholarship that helped pay for my 4 years at UW-Oshkosh. So I think it's a great plan. Do I think there might be some scenario of 9 schools, 9 scholarships? In the past few years, we haven't done that. We've had numerous kids from one school and none from another. So I don't think we do get the word out there good enough. If we have to go as a county board supervisor to the school and talk to counselors or to the principal of the high school, so be it, we should do that. I don't know if the money side of it is as important as to reaching as many kids as we can. So I think 1,000 is fine. If you guys want to raise it, I'm fine with that. But I think we should either be at 9 or 10. And that's all I have to say on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gabbard. Next speaker is Supervisor Gordon, followed by Supervisor Powers. Please go ahead, Supervisor Gordon.
Thank you, Chairman Ramos. I know that when I get my application packet every year, I take it to the guidance counselors at Oshkosh North High School, and I make sure that they post so that students know. And then I've also talked with people that I know who have kids who maybe are like planning on attending a local school and encourage their kids to apply for the scholarship because it should be a more equal access scholarship, I believe.
Thank you, Supervisor Gordon. Next speaker is
Everyone
Supervisor.
could take the packets to the guidance counselors. That would be a plus.
Thank you, Supervisor Gordon. Next speaker is Supervisor Powers. Please go ahead, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For about 3 years, and I don't know what the results were, I had gone through just by Googling every single church that I could identify and find out an email for in Winnebago County, and started with my district and then kind of kept working out farther and farther. And I would send a copy, because I had electronic copy. I'd send a copy of the scholarship to every clergy person or faith authority in every congregation, telling them that there is a chance for scholarship money for their high school seniors to go to college. So I don't know how that worked, but I did try to, I must have sent out things to about, I think there were about 47 churches that I contacted over the course of, I mean, every year for about 3 years. I don't know how that worked out, but at least that was one way I was reaching out to people who might know college or high school seniors. And if there's any interest in a committee, I'd be glad to serve. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Seeing no other call, I see Supervisor Finch is waving his hand. Please go ahead, Supervisor Finch.
We used to have a committee, but for some reason, they decided not to. So, but we used to have a committee, and we actually went to the school and talked, but for whatever reasons, they shot us down. So we stopped going to it. But yeah, I mean, when you can go to a school and build up, actually you're building up two things. You're building up the education for the kids, but you're also building up your county. It's your county that's going to help the kids for their college. So, you know, those two things, togetherness. But for whatever reasons, down the road, it got shot down, and that's why we're at where we're at right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Finch. Next, I'll call on Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm bringing back memories of the day when I did serve on the scholarship committee, and I happen to have been the person who created the logo of promoting interest and knowledge of county government as the theme, but it has always been the object of the scholarship to promote interest and knowledge and education about county government. It's not been a scholarship just to help a needy student or to help a student pick up an extra $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000. It's about getting them interested and educated about county government, because the papers that they're required to write are, if it hasn't changed, what position, what job in the county government would you want to have, and why? This is an educational tool with a reward. So I facetiously think that maybe we should phase it out as Supervisor Finch retires from county government, but I don't think that that's probably a good thing. I think he did a good service in initiating it, appealing to the average student, so that the C student could get a chance at getting a scholarship, whereas the A and B students could go to these other sophisticated programs. It was co-opted by the Extension Department as the scholarship committee was dissolved. Perhaps what we do need to do is to add a scholarship committee back into the budget, because all it's going to cost you, I think we had maybe bi-monthly or bi-monthly or semi-monthly or quarterly meetings, and at the times when it was appropriate, we went out to the various high schools.
Point of order,
and-
point of order, Chair. I have a point of order.
What's your point of order, Supervisor Schellinger?
I mean, this is all good discussion. We're having good discussion on the scholarship program. But you were right when you said before, we're basically here to determine how much money goes into the scholarship fund, and not how the scholarship fund works. I mean, we can.
We'll let him wrap up though, the other Supervisor Schellinger. I think he's almost finished.
All right.
Anything further, Supervisor Eisen?
Well, no, I think it may be in good order to maybe Supervisor Finch can request a scholarship committee be formed for the next budget period.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Now, seeing no other call-ins, that'll conclude our budget for the county board and the scholarship program. So we'll move on to the next budget, which would be the airport budget. So that's at the top of the second page. So on the agenda for November 2nd. Now that starts on page 294. And before we move to Director Schell's comments, any comments in regards to the airport budget, Executive Damel?
No, I think Jim will do a good job on this.
Very good. Director Schell, any overview you want to provide on the airport budget?
Thank you, Chairman Ramos, members of the board. I would just say that over the last couple of years, I think we've all seen a lot of different challenges keeping budgets within a zero-based balance and keeping operating levies down. I think we've done a good job of keeping along those same lines throughout the last couple of years, several years actually. And just to point out that we are under our target levy, our operating target levy for the year. Actually have a very small decrease in our operating levy from 2021 to 2022. Of course, we have a list of significant changes on page 299, which kind of outline a number of different things there and some explanations for them. And then I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have specifically about our 2022 budget.
Very good. Thank you, Director Schell. We'll open it up for any questions in regards to the airport budget. I see one hand. I'll call on Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
Hi, Jim. Just out of curiosity, every year I ask if you got enough money for marketing, and I see that big new business park we got still sits empty. What are your future plans for that? Do we need to spend more money on marketing? I mean, the city's got a lot of money in that. We got a lot of money in that. We need to get some development going there. What is your plan to jumpstart that so that we can start to see some revenue coming in for both the city and the county?
Absolutely. Great question. Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Actually, if you look at our promotions budget, going back to 2018, when I started, it was actually budgeted at $65,000 annually. I do believe that was over budgeted. I think there's a number of things that could have been done differently and are being done differently now. $65,000, about a third of that was going towards one contract that we had for business development and marketing services, which was a flat monthly fee that we were paying a former contractor. We brought that now in-house to try to do that quite a lot better ourselves. And so we've got a number of things as far as promoting the airport in general, and then business development specifically aimed at the business park. We've been working very closely, more closely than we had even the last couple of years. We've been working more closely in the last 6 to 12 months with Greater Oshkosh EDC, but also the city. So the city's been very much engaged in the last few months. We're actually looking to rebrand just the business park itself. Talked about that a little bit at our committee level. We'll have something coming forth with the aviation committee here. Should be next month. And then really just trying to set ourselves apart, because there's a lot of airports out there. that have a business park like we do. A lot of cities, a lot of municipalities that have industrial parks like Oshkosh does. And it's about differentiating yourselves. Right now, I think what we have been doing is substantial efforts in developing that park. We just came back from MBAA convention in October. That was very well attended, but we hadn't had one of those in 2020. We had no real opportunities to network in 2020 with things all going virtual and no in-person events. So we're looking 2022. So since we're talking about the 22 budget, we're looking to go again to MBAA next year, again to for the first time actually to MRO Americas, which maintenance, repair, and overhaul is what MRO stands for. That's a lot like what you see up in Appleton with Gulfstream. They bring their fleet in from all around the world really to get maintenance done, repairs done, overhauls of engines and interiors and those sorts of things. So that's a big one that I don't think we've had a presence at now for several years. We went once back to that convention back in 2017. And so that is something that, we're bolstering our travel budget in order to go get out there and meet with more and more people, to tell them about the business park, tell them about how it's great to do business at the Whitman Regional Airport in Oshkosh and the Fox Valley in general. I think the biggest thing is it's a numbers game. I mean, you got to get, and you got to be persistent. You got to keep on people's radar. Having a conversation with them once 2 years ago, if that's not followed up on, really, you fall away in a lot of people's minds because, think about it. We all have a lot of things going on in our lives. And so if we're not constantly out in front of people, marketing the airport, like I said, 2020 was very difficult for that. We did try to do a virtual convention. MBAA did a virtual event in 2020, and it was terrible. There's really just no way to network with people through a computer screen. It just doesn't work that way, especially with a convention of 20 to 30,000 people. It's impossible. So we're really excited for the in-person events coming back. We're looking to go to 4 of those next year in total, 2 that are specifically aimed at the business park. And we're also, again, with the rebranding efforts with GoEDC in the city, just as far as differentiating our business park. I think our airport is already differentiated quite well in the aviation community, but giving it a new look, giving it a little bit of a marketing advantage over what we've been using for marketing materials in the last couple of years is kind of where we're headed with that. And that is a big partnership with GoEDC and the city of Oshkosh.
That was good. We're just looking forward to getting something out there, creating some more jobs for the good paying jobs for the people in Winnebago County and Oshkosh, so that basically they can provide a good living for their family. Thanks for the answer.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Next speaker is Supervisor Buck, followed by Supervisor Fari. Please go ahead, Supervisor Fari. Supervisor Buck, you can go ahead and unmute your mic.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Supervisor Schell. Supervisor Bender kind of took a little bit of my thunder, but taking the aviation tour out there, I guess you had mentioned maybe a few years ago that you were close to securing somebody out at the aviation business park. I guess maybe you answered it, but what's the big hurdle out there? We have the Fox Valley Tech, the right on the airport. I guess I'm wondering, are there other general aviation facilities in Northeast Wisconsin that provide that same service? I guess to me, it's a great asset, to the airport. I guess just, what other hurdles are you facing, Jim? You could answer that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Supervisor Buck. Great question. There's always a number of different factors that go into this. Location is one of them. I mean, with real estate and with development of an industrial park or aviation business park in this case, location is a big factor. Certain companies are only looking for certain areas of the country to operate, depending on what their business model is or what their future expansion plans are. So location is one of them. You asked about our competitors. Yeah, we do have stiff competition both north and south of us. So we have, not only a general aviation airport south of us that's a competitor in a way, But we have a commercial service airport 25 minutes north of us that's a competitor in a big way. Because you've seen what they've done with Gulfstream up in Appleton. You've seen what they've done with a number of other developments, not only their base tenants, but things that they're trying to do to gain additional business up there. So, you'd be remiss if you didn't acknowledge that competition and figure out, how we can do things better or differently in order to grow what we're trying to do down here in Oshkosh. So, there are a lot of competitors just in the less than a half an hour drive from us. To the same extent, Green Bay is trying to do things that we're trying to do as well. So even commercial service airports are always trying to differentiate their revenue streams so that they're not overly reliant on airline service and passengers and parking and all those things. Because as we've seen through the pandemic, especially, when it's good, it's good. When it's not good, it's not good. So, differentiating revenue streams is a big part of, financially what we're also trying to do, so that we're not over reliant on one thing like a convention that didn't happen in 2020. So, those are so many different factors that go into developing it, but the hurdles really lie in, again, that numbers game. We've got prospects that, at times are good and maybe hotter than others. And then we've got things like what happened this past year that really set things back quite a bit. There's certain sectors of the aviation industry that have been booming, and then there's certain sectors that are just trying to keep their head above water. And so, there's a lot of variety of different challenges that not only the pandemic has created, but just the way people are doing business these days has kind of had a ripple effect on the aviation world.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Supervisor Buck. Next is Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Fari.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question relates to goals and objectives. I'm looking at page 296. Number 8 refers to a rental car tenant that needs to be secured to serve the transportation needs of the local and flying public. Could you give us an update on that, please?
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Supervisor Fari, for the question. For many years, as I think a lot of the supervisors are aware, we had Hertz rental car services based out of the former airline terminal for a number of years, all the way up and through the end of 2019. So a little bit of history on that. Hertz actually closed their location here for business reasons of their own in the end of 2019, and shortly thereafter, just a few months later, as a corporation, entered bankruptcy. So Hertz, before the pandemic even got started, was going through a bankruptcy proceeding, and so that's really been difficult for their business in order to kind of come through the other side of that. And of course, COVID-19, we hate to talk about it, continually, but it had a massive impact on the travel industry, the airline industry, and then to a very large degree, the rental car business as a nationwide and even a global impact. So right now we've been in discussions with a couple different rental car agencies, and we did have Enterprise Rent-A-Car here at the terminal using that space for AirVenture Week. But even then, their fleets are so far down from where they historically, have been. They were only renting 30 to 40% at best of the numbers that they historically had for AirVenture Week. And if you want to serve that demand, but they're just unable to right now. I've talked to a lot of different people in the automotive industry and different industries that kind of complement that, and kind of trying to figure out where the rental car industry is going in the first couple quarters of 2022. And it is set to rebound, but they do have to get their fleets back up to where they were. Demand is coming back strong. They just don't have the fleets to serve that demand. So while we've had ongoing conversations with a couple rental car agencies in the last few months, and we've actually, I don't know if you're familiar with what's happened with Hertz lately. Broadway Automotive has actually purchased that business up in Appleton, so the Hertz location at the Appleton airport. So there's been some developments there as well. Again, we have a rental car space that was designed in the new facility. I believe that it's an important service to offer at any airport, commercial service or general aviation. They both have their clienteles that we serve. and commercial service airports serve that need rental cars. And having a presence there to actually serve that demand when it does come back, I think is a very important piece of the puzzle for us.
Thank you very much for that detailed explanation. I guess COVID-19 continues, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker is Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Schell, thank you very much for your excellent work and the progress we've made under your leadership. We appreciate it very much. Could you address just a little bit some of the other revenue producing ideas that you have and where we are with those, and then how they impact this budget in 2022?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. So other revenue producing areas. Number one is hangars. Excuse me. We have been well behind the power curve for, I'd say, over a decade on building new hangars at the airport. The last new hangars that the county built was actually about 2001. And so 20 years since we built new facilities. At the same time, we've attempted prior to my tenure here to maintain the facilities to the best of our abilities. And since we've taken over, since 2018, we've really looked hard at which hangar facilities are maintainable and which hangar facilities just need to be replaced. And we have a very good handle. We have a very good handle on that. But as you'll see coming forward in the 2020, and it was in the CIP last year as well. But in 2022, we'd be looking to build new hangar units out here at the airport, and definitely to serve the demand that we already have. We have a more than 40-person waiting list that just continues to grow. We've seen a lot of turnover in hangars actually in the last few months, with I think a lot of implications from the pandemic, people selling airplanes, people buying airplanes, not unlike the used boat market and the RV market that, just been bought up very quickly. So we've seen a lot of activity there, but we still see a very strong and healthy waiting list of people that want to have their airplane here at our airport. We just don't have the facilities to accommodate that demand, and we haven't for many years. So that's number one, is building new hangars to serve that demand and create additional revenue sources and increase those revenue streams for the airport of hangar rentals. Number two would be the site just right next door, out my back window, where the old airline terminal once stood. So adjacent to the new GA facility, we've got a prime location, not only for aeronautical redevelopment, but potentially some non-aeronautical development closer to 20th Avenue. And we're just starting to wrap up. We're getting there now. Our master plan update that we've been in the works for a little over 2 years. And one of those things is looking at how we can best use our land, the highest and best use of different areas that need redevelopment, and areas that are undeveloped that could be developed further. So there's a number of tracts of land that we have that we can either build on ourselves or lease out to private entities to, construct new developments or new infrastructure at the airport. And all those things create additional revenue. So I guess those are some of the high level ones. But there's a number of other things that we are looking into every single day. We're always talking about how we can, find a way to create another revenue stream. And there's other ideas out there, but I won't try to go too far down the rabbit hole with some of those. But if I might, I just want to talk about the flip side of the coin. We've been very successful in reducing our operating expenses over the last 2 to 3 years. The biggest of which is the old airline terminal, which is no longer. But as you can see, just in our power and light and our heat utilities, from 2018 to now, we've gone down about $60,000 just in utilities that we're no longer paying. And that's actually a conservative estimate. We're kind of trying to look and see exactly where the new facility plays out once we have a calendar year of data to analyze. And we feel that'll come down even more. But we've reduced expenses quite a lot in that area. And if you look, at our trend of things that we can control, over the last 3 years, our operating expenses have come down somewhat significantly. And so, both sides of the coin, we're making advances on both.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker is Supervisor Snyder, followed by Supervisor Gordon. Please go ahead, Supervisor Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, if you're looking for any artwork for the new terminal, I have a picture of a certain petty officer 3rd class with his then fiance just before I stepped onto an airplane to fly off to Vietnam.
That's awesome. Yeah, we
That was
actually,
54 years ago.
that's amazing. We would love to take a look at it and love to find a spot for it. We actually are looking for additional historical photographs framed, historical prints of any kind, or any kind of general artwork to display in the meeting rooms, and some in other interior spaces of the new facility. So I'd be happy to, if anybody has anything along those lines, similar to what you just mentioned, we'd love to look at it.
Well, I'll get one blown up and framed and bring it down.
That'd be great.
Thank you, Supervisor Snyder. Next speaker is Supervisor Gordon. Please go ahead, Supervisor Gordon.
Thank you, Chairman Ramos. Jim, I have a question on page 305 under other operating supplies. That one increased 216%, and I just wondered what those supplies might be. It's object 53533.
Right, yeah, I took a look at the page you referenced, and then the significant changes table on 299 for other operating supplies kind of outlines that increase. So what it says there is an increase based on shifting our purchases from items that are consumable, from small equipment to other operating supplies. And without, I don't know if Carol Blackmore's on, because we had talked about this. I'll have to find my note on it.
I'm really just kind of curious, that was all.
Sure. No, I do have a note on that, if I can dig up my working copy. So actually, one of the things we did, we were purchasing oil for the airport, for our equipment, our vehicles, out of the fuel line item, and that got shifted into other operating supplies. So I know that's one of those things. And I'm trying to recall the other one, but it was really just a shift from a couple different other categories into other operating supplies, just to reallocate where we were purchasing certain items from that made more sense categorized under that other operating.
All right, thanks. That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gordon. Next speaker is Supervisor Cox. Please go ahead, Supervisor Cox.
Director Snell, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Thank you. Director Snell, a few months ago, we passed a resolution that dealt with a contract that you're currently pricing your land for hangars at about 16 cents a square. Is there some reason that can't be raised a little bit as long as you're trying to increase your revenues?
Absolutely, that's a great question, and thank you for bringing that up. We've looked at this for some time now. Quite honestly, our whole ordinance for the airport is due for a bit of a rewrite and a cleanup. We've got a lot of things in there that just are antiquated and no longer necessary, and then there's some areas that we do need to adjust, not only in our land lease rate with what you pointed out, but also in our T-hanger rental rates, because that hasn't been done for a few years. So we're actually working on that right now in order to kind of clean up the ordinance as a whole. But since our land lease rates are published in ordinance, obviously it would take a resolution from the county board to update the entire ordinance, which we're working on bringing forward first to Corporation Council for their review and then through the approval process. Specifically about the 16 cents per square foot, I think for a private development, and that contract you referenced was for a private hangar being built on the airport. We've looked at that quite a lot. I don't think the 16 cents a square foot is low really by any means. If you look at other airports in the state of Wisconsin or other similar general aviation airports in other states that are surrounding us, 16 cents in a lot of ways is actually high for some of them. But for an airport our size, I think 16 cents for a private development makes a lot of sense. But for a commercial development, that's where the rubber meets the road. So I won't say exactly the rate that we're looking to establish for commercial aeronautical development, but we're trying to look to split those two out. So we say 16 cents and probably another penny on top of that for just to keep up with, general like CPI adjustments and those things. That historically has gone up a penny every few years, that rate, but then creating a separate rate for commercial development. And we'll kind of hone in on what that needs to look like, just to be in line with other airports that have both types of rates, and make ourselves still very competitive in order to, offer land for development at a still reasonable rate for commercial.
Director Snell, have you checked with Appleton, as you've referred to before, and checked their pricing for private hangars?
We have that all in a spreadsheet of a number of airports that we've got rates and charges for. So we've not only Appleton, but a number of other airports around the state in order to analyze where we need to be. So yes, we've definitely looked at Appleton, Fond du Lac, Green Bay, Janesville. I mean, there's quite a fairly long list. Also, the Wisconsin Bureau of Aeronautics publishes a rates and charges study every year, and we take a look at that every single year. Analyzing our rates a couple of different ways in order to make sure we've got all the information we need to make a recommendation for updating our ordinance to the county board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cox. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and conclude the airport budget. Thank you, Director Schell, for being here and providing the information today. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next budget, which is the Highway and County Road Maintenance Fund budgets. So that starts on page 310. So first I'll go to Executive Damo. Do you have any comments on the highway budget before we go to Highway Commissioner Damo?
No, I'm going to let this up for Bob.
All right, very good. Highway Commissioner Damo, anything you want to review on the highway budget?
Thank you for inviting us this morning here. We were able to maintain status quo with our budget for this year. Being that this is my first budget, it's been a lot to go through, and my office staff here, office manager, has done a great job working here with this, and we're pretty confident we can maintain that budget where we're at.
Very good, thank you. We'll open it up for any questions from the county board in regards to the highway budget and the road maintenance fund. I see one. I'll call on Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
Morning, Bob. Just curious, did you get the mold situation controlled in the office spaces? I know for a while there that it was quite bad and facilities was putting some fans or something in there, but do we have something to basically take care of that in the future and get them offices remodeled so that people are safe working in there?
Yeah, Steve, we have air purifiers going right now, and our mold levels are better than they were. I have worked with facilities with this, and we are looking to have a design done here, a feasibility study for the buildings in our shop here. So that's where we're at yet. We're still waiting to schedule that study.
And how is it we coming with the bridge engineer manager? When are we going to replace that position? I mean, you taking over the commissioner's job, I mean, that's a full-time job. When are you going to get a replacement to take over your old job?
We've been really busy here, a little short-staffed, and definitely the bridge inspections. I've been pulling a lot of double duty there with bridge inspections. I just finished up last month with a bunch of those. I still have some this month to finish up. And that is next on our list to get that position filled. I'd like to get that as soon as I can with that. And that is next on our agenda to get that filled as soon as we can.
I think that would be good. I mean, I don't want to see you burn yourself out trying to do two jobs. I mean, it's difficult enough to be the highway commissioner, let alone do your old job. So I'm looking forward to seeing that posted and getting you the help that you need so that you can do your job. Thanks.
I appreciate that, Steve. We're, yeah, we have some staff here that we can delegate to push some of this, the bridge inspections to help me out with that too. So we'll get through. It'll take a little bit to get through this.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Next speaker is Supervisor Buck, followed by Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Bob. I would just first and foremost want to say thank you to you and your team. The mowing schedule has been great, has been stopping some phone calls from my constituents. Just wondering, are you going to continue on that same mowing schedule? It seems to me out in my district that you're mowing more of the ditches, maybe down in the ditch line. Is that something that you're going to continue to do?
Yes, correct. We have worked with the town people out there. We do have a schedule with that. We did complete a fall mowing here to help out in the spring thaw. So should help alleviate some issues out there. We did replace a culvert out there too this year, this fall. So yeah, we will continue with that process out there. We did treat some of the ditches out there with to get rid of some of those cattails and weeds, and that seemed to help out a lot. So we're gonna continue to look at that, but yeah, definitely the mowing will be a part of that.
Appreciate that. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Buck. Next speaker is Supervisor Shorsey, followed by Supervisor Schellinger. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Great. Thank you, Director Damel, or Commissioner Damel. I would like to bring up just a little issue that's come up through constituents, and I talked to the previous commissioner and didn't get very far. But if we could consider putting in a budget in the budgets when we do roundabouts for some basic plantings. The response I got previously was that it was up to the people who lived in that area to put plantings in the roundabouts, the centers of the roundabouts. And I don't think that is a good practice. So we do have some roundabouts that are out there that do not have plantings. They do have lots of weeds. So I would like to request that you consider that in terms of your budget and going forward when we put those things in place to make sure we have at least a basic planting scheme that doesn't have to be maintained. I understand that's an issue, but I don't think it's fair to expect the taxpayers to buy plants for the roundabout that's owned by the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker is Supervisor Schellinger, followed by Supervisor Rasmussen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so I would like to ask a few questions around related to the wages and sort of how you're, how you are handling some of the dynamics that we've been seeing in employment. So it looks like in 2021 you're projected to be about an eighth short of your regular pay amount from what was allocated. Is that a function of, as it sounds like you alluded to earlier, not having all your positions filled?
Yes, that is correct.
Can you give me a sense about what is, what are you kind of dealing with in an ongoing basis? Like, are you, is one out of every positions you have vacant, or kind of how has that been going for you?
Well, we started out obviously this year, it started out with the bridge tenders. The Department of Transportation decided to go with the remote operations. And as we moved into the process of testing for the remote operations, we had a lot of staff decide that they were not interested in participating in that remote operations. So we were short-staffed. We end up putting highway department workers on the bridges to cover those shortfalls. We're just waiting now for next year to find out if the Coast Guard will let us go remote operations. And we I didn't want to fill those positions. And then if remote operations comes next year, we have to, let those people go. So that was part with the bridges. Our staffing at the highway department, we have had people leave our facility or leave our department to go work in the private sector. We're filling those as we go. At one point this year, I think we were like 5 or 6 positions short. We were able to fill some of those. The general consensus is we'll make offers to people and then they'll go back to their employee and they're offered more money and they turn down the position. That's kind of where we've been. We've had our retirement this year, last month, we need to fill. So all in all, I mean, we have been able to get a few people here and there, but it is a struggle to find staffing right now.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like with all that, tax, that's got to be a lot of additional workload on folks. I see we have a lot of overtime, that we sort of plan for every year. Is that how are you making up for that with overtime, or is there work that's sort of falling behind?
I mean, there is, obviously with being short on staff, I mean, there is some crews we can't put out there during the week. So we will cut some of those. And there has been delays with some of those projects to get out, no doubt with that. Our main projects, our paving projects is our big push. We just don't want to, be short on that end with our paving projects and our larger projects. And obviously overtime just comes with, with the business we're in. I mean, as long as the sun's shining, we're out there working. Even our rain days, we still, we can do some of the ditching work and stuff during the rain days. But we, during the winter too, I mean, obviously the overtime we can't get away from, wish it didn't snow on the weekends, but it just seems like that's just the way it goes. But yeah, the overtime is part of it. And our crew has done a great job to step up and cover any of those shortfalls.
Okay, thanks. So I see, so last year we budgeted money for the first time first time in a while, we had budgeted money for temporary employees. Looks like is that correct that we're still not planning to use any temporary employees in 2021?
We just have had a hard time getting those employees. In the past, I think we've had 8 positions during the summer temporary. We had 2 people this year. So we've had a very hard time filling those temporary.
Okay. Do you see anything, we have $87,000 budgeted for that in this budget. Do you think you're going to run into the same problem, or like what do you think is going to change that we're going to be able to hire temporary employees next year where we weren't able to this year?
I just don't know the future with that. I wish I had an idea. I wish I could say, yeah, we'll have no problem getting those. I would imagine, the 2 we have come back year to year. It's just one of those, it kind of depends on, staffing. It's hard to compete with a lot of the students we had last year. A lot of them, the quick trips are, paying a lot more than that we are paying those for those positions, and it's hard to compete against those.
Okay. Last question then. What do can you give us some recommendations about what we can do to help you get to full staffing so that you are able to do the projects that need to be done and we're not missing things?
I think as far as staffing, the big thing is like I said, it's hard to compete with the private sector when we interview and do offers to these people, and then they come back and they said, hey, my previous employer offered me, a few dollars more to stay. We just don't have that option. You know, and that's, I mean, we're working with HR right now. Next week, we have a meeting with Mike Collard to discuss some of these issues that we're having, and we're hoping we can come up with some ideas to help that out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Shiloh, you're muted.
Next speaker is Supervisor Rasmussen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two things. First one, Supervisor Bender did kind of talk about that, Bob, you've had this job since April and still doing both jobs, your bridge job also. And I hear it is November, and I would hope that you're going to get some help on that soon. I commend you for doing all of that in the busiest time of the year. Second one is, you kind of answered it with staffing, but in specifics for this time of year coming up, I saw a report last week that New York City was 95 operators short for plows. Are you feel pretty confident that you're going to be able to fill the plows and with that season coming up, keep the roads safe?
Yeah, I do, Joel. We did have our mechanics. We had a COVID protocol for a lot of them. We had almost all but one mechanic out. I think it was 2 weeks ago, and so it touched home here real close. And we know now if a situation like that comes up, we're very fortunate it came up when it did. Something like that hits us in this winter. Yeah, that's one thing we need to look forward to. I know other highway commissioners, we've kind of discussed, the probability of something like this happening. But I mean, it's going to be one of those where we just got to play when it comes up. I mean, we may be short-staffed. We may be relying on extra hours. We're just going to have to kind of address that as it comes up.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Seeing no other call-ins, that'll go ahead and conclude the Highway and County Road Maintenance Fund budget. Thank you, Highway Commissioner Damo, for your responses and for being here today. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
So we'll move on to the next budget, which is public health. That starts on page 333. Before we go to Director Gearin, Executive Damo, anything you want to highlight on the public health budget?
This one was complicated. This was probably one of the harder ones for me to really digest. But I'm gonna pass this off to Doug and let's see what Director Gearin can explain.
Very good. Director Gearin, any overview you want to provide on the public health budget?
Thank you. I can really just let you know that the major changes are still dominated by the COVID response. And so where you see changes, it's just incorporating primarily additional funding for our continued response into 2022. The funding that is available can be extended past 2022 if we need it. However, we've brought in what's available for 2022, and if there are funds left over, we can carry those into 2023. If you look at our department as a whole right now, probably have about 45% of our FTE, directly responding to the pandemic right now. On top of that, we have probably another 20 to 22 FTE of additional staff, roughly another 40 to 45 people responding, with our regular staff to the pandemic. So we're maintaining a pretty high level of response and operation for COVID at this time. Unfortunately, the COVID picture is not improving very quickly. We did have a bit of a downturn in cases But that has since reversed course a little bit, maintaining at really a very high level of activity. We're calling it more of a plateau of activity. We're having a bit of a shift in the burden of cases to younger people. And we're seeing rates in our school-aged kids go up. We're on the verge of giving 5 to 12-year-olds vaccines starting next week. Our first clinic with the Oshkosh School District is on next Monday. And it's likely that we're going to be in this place for a while as people are moving indoors and we have the holidays, and attitudes are certainly shifting away from COVID. And in terms of any preventative measures, it's likely that we'll be in a place of high activity for some time yet to come. We continue to work with our school districts to keep them as prepared as possible. We continue to maintain testing sites, vaccination sites, and do all the contact tracing. And so trying to let people know when they're positive, and of course, all the technical assistance and hotline and all the other facets of the response that we have going on right now. We're certainly reaching a point where, the public is going to really need to decide, to become vaccinated or to get COVID. And, the risk benefit of the vaccine is certainly favors getting vaccinated versus becoming infected. And it's really, at this point, it just appears to be a matter of time before that happens. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director Gearin. I see a couple of call-ins. First, I'll call on Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have open mic here, I believe.
Yes, please go ahead.
Doug, I don't have a question about your budget. I want to take a few minutes here to congratulate you on the operation and system that you have set up out at the Expo Center. Of course, I've had all my shots there. We've had several meetings there, and I got to say that is an excellent operation. Very well done. So thank you for your service in regard to that, providing that for the public of this county. So thank you very much.
Appreciate that, and I'll be sure to pass that on to staff.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker is Supervisor Bender, followed by Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
Morning, Doug. I was at the legislation meeting and you gave a real nice presentation on how the county could help with affordable daycare. And I think that's truly essential in order to get people back to work. At $15 an hour, like you said, it doesn't pay for the daycare. Could you just give the highlights of that to the county board so they could understand, like, if we could use some of that ARPA money to help with affordable daycare, in your opinion, how that would benefit Winnebago County?
Sure, I could speak at a real high level, and I'd be happy to pass on, our presentation. But, there are a number of opportunities that exist with ARPA. It's funding that at a level that we have not seen in generations. It has the potential to have very significant impacts on, our social programs. Help people recover from COVID, and also, help provide a pathway for people that, are in a cyclical cycle, a generational cycle of poverty, of low education, of just not being able to, improve their setting, improve their education, improve their ability to succeed and really meet their basic needs, so that they can really flourish and contribute to society. And so, we're looking at what are the opportunities that exist right now, and what are the investments that we can make moving forward. I mean, one of the biggest challenges with ARPA is that we have one-time funds that are, coming this year and next year. And how do we invest those in a way that we have a long-term impact on with their effect? And it's the same, it's the same conundrum we have with using our reserves. We can use them one time to do something, but obviously we can't sustain them. Just like we can't add a bunch of people and then expect to have the money in the future to continue to pay them. So there are investments that can be made with ARPA that can have those longer term impacts, and investing in in our community is a great way to do that. Certainly another way to do that is also to look at projects that may free up future levy dollars so that, operationally you'll have more dollars, in that future. But in terms of really maternal child health and childcare, particularly, childcare is very expensive. And if you're anywhere near minimum wage or even up to $15 an hour, spending $1,000 a month for childcare is not a part of the equation. We have a lot of people that have left the workforce and are not coming back simply because they just can't afford childcare. It's if your entire salary is going to pay childcare, there isn't a lot of point in taking a job. And so there's an area where, one, we don't have enough access to childcare. Our childcare workforce is too small. By having more infrastructure for childcare, by paying higher wages for childcare, and making childcare more affordable, we can bring people back to the workforce, which is more of an immediate need, and it allows an increase in workforce size, and then hopefully also allows for families to succeed and then generationally pass that success on, so that our community as a whole recovers and has less poverty, less low education. And so that's just one example. And like I said, I'm happy to pass on additional information about that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Nussbaum. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to refer to the public health budget on page 351. And on this page, there's a line that indicates expense total. And under 2022, there is a request for $4,816,233. That means to me that the department asked for that amount of money. And then on the executive, when the department head went in front of the executive to present his budget, he came back with $6,219,227. So that the exec put in $1,402,994 more than the department director asked for. Could you explain this?
Thank you. I can explain that. We do our budgets, in July and submit them. And then we have our meetings in August. Really, we start that process in June. And in the time in between, we became aware of what funding allocations would be available to us for COVID response in 2022. And so we incorporated those additional COVID funds as part of the budget, anticipating the use of those funds in 2022. And that's really the difference.
Okay, so then on page 346, where it's indicated for intergovernmental revenue, and the request was for $1,608,555, and the executive put in $2,952,756. That's where the money came in. You're using CARES money. Is that what it was? Or
yes, Supervisor Eisen, that is where, so the most of the monies for COVID right now, COVID response, are funneled through the state, and it's a federal pass through. And so that's where those additional funds are. There, of course, were other minor changes in the budget, but they were really dwarfed by the funding that was made available for COVID.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Nussbaum, followed by Supervisor Schellinger. Please go ahead, Supervisor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I refer to page 340, 2022 goals and objectives, number 9. Focus on increasing staff understanding of equity, culture of competence, and address racism as public health crisis. This sounds like socialist, Marxist, globalist rhetoric. If our taxes are funding Marxist propaganda, we got to put a stop to that. My questions are we getting outside funding for this number 9? And what object line are these expenses coming from? And how much of that is being used for this purpose? Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Nussbaum. So equity is a theme that's within the values of our public health department. In other words, we examine the entire population, try to identify where disparities exist, and try to find solutions to help address those disparities. So, there's no hidden agenda here. We're, not politically affiliated. We are really simply looking at what's the health of our community, where do disparities exist, and then how do we address those disparities to improve opportunities for everyone in our community to live, a high quality of life. And that's simply it. It's woven throughout our entire budget. When we do data analysis, we certainly try to break things down to see, are there certain populations, and that doesn't mean it's just race. I mean, it could be age, it could be rural versus urban. There's just a number of different factors that influence health and create unintentional disparities that we can examine and offer solutions for. Thank you.
Are we getting any outside funding? And what about the line, object line number for this, paying for this?
So again, there's no specific object line number for equity work. It's woven into all of our program areas as really an overarching goal in our department to address. And yes, there is funding that does come from the state that helps us with that. And there's also levy dollars that go into that as well. And really it's not because it's so interwoven in the work that public health does. It's difficult to parse out how many dollars are spent on that. I mean, the ways that I could potentially find that are, how much time has been spent on a particular grant or how much training has occurred within our department. But it's really just a part of what we do.
Thank you, Supervisor Nussbaum. Next speaker, Supervisor Schellinger. Please go ahead, Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking through the list of accomplishments, they are really impressive, and they show to me the breadth and depth of the way that you and your staff impact our community, and wanted to express some appreciation for some of the work that you're doing beyond just the COVID related work, which seems to be almost half of what you're doing. So I'm really, I'm curious, number 12, for 2011, you talk about increasing the WIC clients for women and infant children. I'm curious if you could just kind of talk a little bit about the programming in general that you offer towards improving maternal and infant health outcomes.
Sure. Thank you, Supervisor Schellinger. So maternal child health is an area, a large area of our work that encompasses the WIC program, which is a federally supported nutrition and nutrition education program for children under age 5, mothers that are breastfeeding or that are pregnant. That program at the federal benefit to our community, is over $1 million in Winnebago County alone in terms of the vouchers that are redeemed in Winnebago County for nutritious foods. It's about a $500,000 program in terms of administration and the education and the visits from women and monitoring child health. From WIC, we do reach a high risk population and are able to offer or refer children that are, not up to date in terms of, school readiness or their vaccines, or that, that need additional support, prenatal care coordination. And then in terms of maternal child health and looking at the overall health in our community of women and children, there's a number of components there that we partner with in the community. And this is a lot of community partner engagement work. First Five Fox Valley is a great example of a partnership that we have. And in fact, we've been a part of developing recommendations for our community on how to improve maternal child health. And the discussion that I just had with you about ARPA and access to childcare is certainly a part of that. We work closely with childcare providers, with schools, and other supporting organizations within the community to try to help provide data and guide decisions about where resources can be best allocated. Human Services is, of course, an important partner in that.
Thank you. I want to shift to your table of significant changes and ask about the nursing services. And I guess just ask if you could enumerate the nursing services that we are not resuming.
So at this point, and if you can direct me to more specifically where you're looking, that may help. But while you're doing that, because of COVID, some of our routine activities ceased. And we've really been relying on the community to try to help pick the slack up for some of that. But, giving childhood immunizations, TB skin tests, a lot of, some of the more routine, walk-in type services, we've had to suspend in order to be able to respond to COVID. And, we are looking at, as we recover, from COVID or move into more of a recovery mode from COVID, which services are most important to bring back? What did we learn during the pandemic about our partners and where some of those things may have been picked up? Childcare, car seats, cribs, things that we have done in the past. What has changed in our community as a result of COVID that may require us to continue those services or not? I mean, we typically try to be that provider of last resort. And so if there is a resource in the community that we can support, we're not going to try to duplicate that. And we certainly don't want to compete with either other nonprofits or for-profit companies that can provide services within the community, and just focus on those that really fall through the cracks or that just are unintentionally put in a position where they are not able to access services. So we're taking a very deliberate look at how to utilize those resources in the future.
Okay. So yeah, thanks. I was looking at page 343, about halfway down. The account is nursing services, and the description is decreased based on not resuming nursing services that are billed and are not intending on resuming in 2022. So those are the childhood immunizations, TB testing, walk-in services. Are you, so it sounds like are those the services you're unsure if you will be resuming in 2023 and beyond, or at some point?
Those are services we're looking at that may look different moving forward. We may find that because of the pandemic and the way partners responded within our community, that we may be able to focus on other higher priority needs, because those services can be obtained elsewhere, working through with our healthcare systems, working with our free clinics or free and charitable clinics, like Father Carr's or Partnership Healthcare Center. We really want, and this isn't going to sound, you're probably not going to appreciate this, but when somebody comes in for a vaccine for their child, it's like, we don't really want them to come to us, because we're not a medical home. We want them to have comprehensive access to healthcare. And so anything that we can do to move those people towards a traditional healthcare model or system or home is what we do. And we ask every person that comes in our doors for services if they're linked up with healthcare. And we try to get them linked up if they're not already a part of a healthcare system.
Okay, thank you so much. Just one more set of questions here I want to have to unfortunately go back to some questions about the pandemic. So you said about 45% of the work is pandemic, related. I'm curious if you have an estimation about how much of those costs are offset by sort of COVID specific revenues.
I can give you an estimate. I mean, so like last year, we put in probably a little better than we put in probably between $800,000 and $1 million in reserve, offset from our regular labor, because we diverted so much of our work to the COVID response. This year, I'm guessing it'll be a little less, but I haven't worked on an estimate yet in terms of how much of our regular levy is being offset by pandemic response of our regular employees. It'll be significant.
Okay. So you also, at the beginning, you also talked about sort of the need to continue to commit, resources towards a COVID response. Do you know, or do you have any kind of insight as to what the 2023, 24 revenue potential is going to be to offset that?
So right now, we have allocated in the budget all of the funds that I'm aware of that are coming through 2022, 2023, and don't know at this point if additional resources are going to be allocated. We are hopeful that there will be additional resources allocated, or that the resources that we have may become more of a dual purpose in terms of not only response, but also recovery. The community is in a worse place because of COVID, and how do we help the community recover over the next several years to what's happened. But unfortunately, no, I'm not aware of additional funds right now. An additional potential source of funds, of course, are ARPA funds that haven't been allocated yet, that are committed to the county and our other jurisdictions.
Okay, thanks. And then lastly, I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what if anything are we doing to think about future pandemic readiness from a public health perspective?
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about that, even at a national level, on how public health departments, are not adequately staffed to respond to these types of crises. We don't have built-in reserve capacity. We don't even have some of the positions that were really critical in our response, and that we've since added. So there's a significant gap. There's also a lack of public health staff. We've had a mass exodus of people from public health, as a strain from the pandemic. Over the past even just 10 years, we've lost a significant fraction of the workforce, 30+% of the workforce. Since the beginning, it was just an article on the Post-Crescent the other day. I mean, since the pandemic began, we've lost around 40% of public health directors in Wisconsin alone, and hundreds nationwide. So the stress on public health departments has been overwhelming, and there is movement to find solutions to help us move forward. But right now, we're just trying to hang on the best we can.
Okay. I'm sorry, I do have one more question. Then you said one of the things that was kind of bouncing around is like how much reserves is available then, or something like that, to be ready for pandemics. Is there any sort of guidance or best practices in public health world about what is a sufficient amount of reserves, or a sufficient amount of rainy day fund to have available?
I'm not aware of a monetary amount. I mean, we've always, taken a reserve seriously, and thought that, it would certainly help us in a crisis situation, because this was a pandemic and it happened everywhere, and it wasn't just localized, to our area. Funding came from, state and federal levels. If this disaster was more local, we would certainly be relying, more on our own resources to respond. And so maintaining some reserve there is helpful for that. And I'll be looking at that, but frankly, I just haven't had the capacity to really look that far ahead or to see where we're at. But I mean, our reserve is sufficient, is more than sufficient right now. And then applying the amount of reserve that we did, for this budget, given the savings and the offset and levy, it seemed reasonable to me.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Supervisor Schellinger. Next speaker is Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Gear, I don't know who sent this, if this was your department, the overdose fatality review, or if that was Dr. Topol's department that sent it, but I found this informative, stunning, and really horrifying. I was amazed at the number of how much the overdose suicides had climbed, overdose/suicides had climbed during last year's COVID, the peak of the COVID. And I was wondering how much does a dose of Narcan cost, and where all do you provide these medications? Do you provide them? Just are they sent out to all schools or hospitals or police and sheriff's departments? And I mean, like, where do they go, and what does that cost, or do we provide those?
Mm-hmm. We do provide them through the health department. They are free to those that request them. And as a part of our needle exchange program, we're certainly in contact with a population that may be in more of need of that. But if any family has an at-risk family member or friend, we do provide those at no cost. They come to us at no cost at this time, although of course there is a cost. I believe, I want to say when we were looking at purchasing them, it was roughly $40 a vial. I don't know what the current cost is. We are working with Vivint Healthcare to acquire those. And in the past, we have taken steps to try to, I think we funded the sheriff's department's, first round of Narcan to help, encourage that process so that officers should carry them. Now it's very common for law enforcement and EMS to have Narcan. Unfortunately, the need continues to grow, and with fentanyl, being so predominant in the drug supply, that it's requiring more and more Narcan as people overdose unsuspectingly with fentanyl. And so, as you mentioned, the spike in deaths, we had, roughly almost a 50% increase in deaths from 2019 to 2020. And we're working on a press release, and we'll probably be putting one out in the next day or so. We're on the same trend for 2021. We have to wait for toxicology results through the coroner's office, but, we're looking at about 32 through October. And that September through the holidays, September to January, February timeframe is really the higher peak season for those overdose deaths. So we may even exceed the huge increase that we had coming into last year. Otherwise, Narcan is available at pharmacies and other locations, and we can certainly help guide people towards getting Narcan if they need it.
And do you put out this OFR annually, or how often will we see this? And the person to contact is Jennifer Skolaski. I'm really impressed with this. I mean, it's very small. It's only 8 pages, but it was packed full of information and graphs. And again, I found it really horrifying how the overdose deaths have climbed this past year.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. We do coordinate that the overdose fatality review through the health department. We contract Jennifer Skolaski to provide coordination of that team, and have contracted with her over the last few years, using largely grant funds through Department of Justice, and are looking to continue that process and also expand to other areas. I mean, we have a child death review team, we have the overdose fatality review team, and we're certainly looking to also take a look at suicides more in general, in terms of how do we identify opportunities to help prevent those in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and conclude the public health departmental budget. Thank you, Director Gearin, for being here and for all the information and answers today. Much appreciated.
Thank you for your support.
We'll move on next to the fourth departmental budget on the November 2nd agenda. That's child support. That starts on page 353, I believe. And Executive Damo, any comments in regards to the child support budget before we move to Director Julie Mabry?
Yeah, I think before I hand it off to Director Mabry, I really want to compliment her and her team. They've been dealing with an audit from the state, and they've really been handling it extremely well, and they've been advocating for our county extremely well, and they've been advocating for the entire state through the audit that they're going to. So I just really want to compliment them on the work that they've been doing. And with that, I'll pass it off to the Director Mabry.
Thank you, Executive Damo. Director Mabry, any highlights you want to provide with the child support budget?
Good morning. Thank you. First of all, thank you, John. I didn't expect to hear that coming today. It caught me off guard a little bit, but I do definitely appreciate it. There has been a lot going on here. As far as the budget goes, I don't have too much that I needed to highlight necessarily. I believe our county levy request has decreased due to increasing of our state allocations. Child support is unique in the fact that we are funded 66% reimbursed from the federal government, and we have added an additional full-time attorney to our table of organizations since all of the turnover in 2019. And so we finally have our leadership team stable, and because of the increase in that, we then get an increase in funds back from the federal government as well. And so that's kind of where you're seeing a lot of that decrease in the county levy request coming from.
Very good. Thank you. We'll open it up for any questions from the county board on the child support budget.
Absolutely.
I don't see any. So very good. We'll conclude that. Thank you, Director Mabry, for your efforts and for being here today.
Thank you. Take care.
I know. So we'll move on to the next budget. That's number 5 on the November 2nd agenda under Veteran Services. Starts on page 365. Executive Damo, anything you want to highlight before we go to Director Buckholz?
Yeah, I just once again, I really appreciate the work that Director Buchholz is doing and his team. I think it's amazing. It's been an honor to get to know them and what they do. There is a change in the table of organization for them. They are removing one position that they're having a hard time filling, and Director Buchholz thought that they could step up, and they didn't actually need the position. So that was an internal look in our budget meeting, and something that he came to us afterwards that he thought that they could do. He's really accepted the one shared mission of county government and whatever we can do to be the best for our veterans and the county as a whole. And I really appreciate that spirit, and we'll turn it over.
Very good. Director Buchholz, anything you want to highlight on the Veteran Services budget?
No, sir. We, as the county exec said, that was a decision to let that position go unfilled. That was my decision. That wasn't any pressure from anybody. I just looking at how we've been handling and the experience of the staff I have, I just felt it was in the best move. Fiscally, it made sense. The staff members were all comfortable with it. It wasn't motivated by anybody other than myself and our team. So this is my third budget, and I think I have things dialed in just right now. I feel good with it. We've come in under levy the last few years, and there's nothing really else I need to discuss unless there's any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Director Buchholz. I see one call in. Supervisor Snyder, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff, do you have any information on kind of a return on investment for our county? It used to be we were returning about $13 for every dollar spent in tax levy. Are we above? I know you've very much increased the amount of federal funding coming to the county during your tenure here. Of everybody, what the bang for their buck?
You know, I can't break it down like a dollar for dollar type. I can tell you that we've exceeded. This is the highest we've ever generated from the federal government this year. In fact, we've passed up my longtime nemesis, Outagamie County, and that felt good this year because it's always been a sticking point with me. We have, I can give you exact numbers from the GDX report, which is the federal report. It's broken down by state, and then it breaks down even further into districts, into counties. It doesn't go necessarily devil down into the cities, but the federal government reports on how much money expenditures are being spent from the federal VA into Winnebago County. And I have it right here. I'll give you the exact numbers if you just bear with me 1 second. So total expenditures for Winnebago County, last reported GDX report reported 81 million.
Somehow, Jeff, you've been muted.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
If you could repeat that, Director Buchholz, you were just muted for a bit. Thank you.
Okay. The GDX report, did I explain how it was broken down? Did you hear that? Okay. The numbers, is that what we missed?
Correct.
Yep, we got 81 million, but then.
So, yeah, I don't know what happened there. 81 million is what's generated from the federal government, just up from the VA alone, Veterans Affairs Office, is being spent in Winnebago County. Now that's broken down even further. Compensation and pension, that's your disability payments and your pension payments, that's 44 million. And then it breaks it down into education, medical care. Medical care is a big one, 32 million. So it does break it down, but 81 million, that's our highest to date. And like I said earlier, that we surpassed Outagamie County, which feels good, especially since they have a clinic right there in their county.
Great job, Jeff.
So,
keep the good work.
I do think it's a good ratio for what our tax levy brings in.
Thank you, Supervisor Snyder. And I don't see any other call-ins, so that'll conclude the Veteran Services budget. Thank you, Director Buchholz, for being here today, for the information and your time. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
So we'll move next to budget number 6 on November 2nd agenda. That's the Human Services budget. The first part of the Human Services budget starts on page 374 with a number of different areas that follow it. So I'll ask if Executive Damel has any highlights he wants to provide before we hand it over to Director Topol.
I do. I just want to say how much of a pleasure it's been getting to know Director Topol and working with him, and giving him some challenges, and how he's accepted those challenges has been very wonderful to see. One of the challenges given to Director Topol was to get out and meet some executive directors of our nonprofits throughout the county. He has a list of 30 that we came up with, and he's successfully met one-on-one with 20 of these. And just to combine that collaboration of working together, of how we can help them and how they can help us, is really something beautiful to see for somebody who's been doing it for such a long time, to be open to expand his horizons. It has been a pleasure. I really appreciate him listening to my concerns with my own family's addiction issues, how we dealt with that, and coming forward with the DA and with everybody else to how we can actually make a difference in the report the Supervisor Powers was referring to from the Health Department, the Overdose Fatality Review Board. It's shocking. It's a crisis that we have right here, and I appreciate his willingness to step up and do whatever it takes to help those in need. And with that, I will hand it over to Director Topol.
Thank you, Executive Damo. Director Topol, any highlights on the Human Services budget you want to provide?
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning. I did want to take just 5 minutes and reflect on some very high level factual information about the Human Services Department that some new supervisors may not know, and maybe it'll be a good refresher for other supervisors as well. Because as you know, the Human Services Department represents about 30% of the entire workforce of Winnebago County and about 30% relative to the budget. So it's a huge department, lots of functions happening, from behavioral health to child welfare to long-term support for disabled children and adults to Aging Disability Resource Center, economic support benefits for Medicaid, for food share, and for some childcare, as well as a large administrative group that worries about billing for us, our records, and providing all of the secretarial support for us every day. So huge budget. A few facts that I wanted to talk about before we get into the budget details. One thing that came up was about turnover, and we did an analysis going back about 5 years, and turnover in our department is about 10% of our workforce every year. So in a 5-year period, we can expect that close to half of our staff are new. So we have staff here that have been here. Half of our staff have been here 5 years or less. That's not atypical for Human Services departments. This personally for me is my 30th year of doing budgets. 14 of them here. Started here in 2007. So I thought it would be interesting for you to hear about some of the things that I've observed from 2007 until now. When I started in 2007, we had about 40,000 requests for service. And this year, we're approaching 60,000 requests for service. A lot of those, most of those turn into full-blown cases that we manage and monitor for some period of time, some extending over the year, involving case management, involving requests for financial services, involving requests for information referral on where to go to get additional help for their family members. In addition to doing case management, therapy, and other services. So also, secondly, from 2007 till now, our increase in staff, FTEs, which is full-time equivalents, have gone up by 10 full-time equivalents from 2007 until this year, which is interesting to me. Since we've had a lot of changes in staff, we've managed to reduce staff in some years, add a few staff in others, but overall the FTE increased by 10 over those 14 years. Our increase in levy from back in 2007 until this year has averaged about 1% increase per year. While our costs, generally speaking, we have to factor in about a 2 to 3% increase in our costs. So what that basically means is that for every year that I've been here, I've been directed to and have reduced our human services budget every single year. Surpluses over time, which has been a concern of very many people. Why are they high? What goes into that is we have to, in a nutshell, we have to budget for what not only we're going to spend for staff, but also what we believe we're going to spend on placements. We have hospital placements we have to pay for county citizens. We have child placement areas of foster care, group homes, family homes, residential care centers, et cetera, et cetera. And we also have to provide a wide variety of community-based services because the contract, we have a contract with the state of Wisconsin. Well, let me back up and just say that our surpluses contain two large areas. One is when we don't have to spend money on placements, we save those costs. Those placements can run 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 or more dollars per year per case. So when we don't have to spend that kind of money, it stays in the budget as a surplus. The other area that we have large surpluses coming from are when the federal and state government, which provide us 60% of our budget costs, when they provide more monies to us that we didn't expect. And this time of year, many facets of federal and state government decide that they have some surpluses and they pass them on to the counties where they believe the money could be best spent. So it comes into our budget, but it hasn't been designated for a specific purpose. We weren't counting on it, and it gets counted as a surplus on our budget, even though it wasn't something that we were aware was coming. So those numbers have gotten large over the last several years. Those kinds of situations have amounted to a couple of $1 million at times, which honestly we're grateful for, that the state and the feds would pass it on to the county so that we can use it either this year or in future years to improve services. So let me just say this about human services, which is a not well-known idea, which is that the Human Services Department of Winnebago County is not Winnebago County's Human Services Department to decide what to do with. It is a state-run system. We have a state-run system in the state of Wisconsin, and the state contracts with counties to run the human services array that the state expects that we will run, and that the feds also expect that we will run. So we don't have a lot of leeway in terms of what we are to provide, other than extra things that we decide that we want to do that then has to come out of tax levy in total, generally speaking. So our system is really a state-run system, but is county administered, and we are county employees, not state employees. And that was a decision that was made back, I think, in the 1950s to have a county-run system. So that's where we are. And our county provides about 30 to 35% of funding for our human services system comes from tax levy, which you're voting on in the next couple of days. 60 to 65% come from federal and state monies that they provide to us under contract, and $2.5 million a year or more comes from our billing of Medicare, Medicaid, and health insurance, because we are running a behavioral health clinic system inside of our Human Services Department. We are acting as a small specialized health system inside our department, and have done that, since the beginning. And so we have responsibilities for providing all of the information that they need through HIPAA, through our audit procedures, et cetera, for that amount. Just 3 more bullet points. This year, the department was directed and did cut about $1.8 million out of what we projected to be our new costs for 2023, and also the request to reduce tax levy as much as possible without reducing staff or cutting programs. And so we did do an exercise back in May that reduced our overall budget for 2023 by 1.8. Then about midsummer, we added back about $600,000 for the increased Connect program personnel funding, and a few additional changes in our overall staffing pattern. So the overall tax levy impact that you see is a reduction of $256,578. However, that represents, in what we were doing behind the scenes, about $1.8 million in reductions. And where did those come from? There are 2 areas that I wanted to highlight. One being that we reduced our placement costs. So what we anticipate we need to spend in placement costs for kids, adults, in multiple systems, mental health, substance abuse, child welfare, long-term support. We reduced those placements by $700,000, and we increased our Medicaid collections estimations by $500,000. So those are just two big areas that we needed to change in order to get our number down to where you see it today. It's a very tight budget, and I will tell you this, that the goal that I heard loud and clear from the county board is that you want a balanced budget, and it's okay if we get there, and if we have some deficits in some lines, that I can come back and request some additional funding if necessary. I hope that we don't need to do that, but it is my goal with you to get to a total balanced budget where we don't have either large deficits or large surpluses in years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Topol. So we'll open it up for any questions from the county board in regards to the human services budget. Any questions from anyone?
I have a question.
Please go ahead, Supervisor Defferting.
Thank you. Yesterday, we spoke briefly about passing on the Winnebago County Connect program over to your department, and I know that you made a comment on it just now on it. Just wanted to get your feel for how the transition has been, if it's been a smooth transition over to you, and what anything that you would need from the county going forward to continue to do the work for the County Connect program, and also like how your connections have been with either local nonprofits and local organizations. Hence the word connect. It was the idea to connect county services to local resources. So just wanted to get a kind of a review of how it's been transitioning over the last couple of months, and also what we should look at, any challenges going forward in 2022.
Sure, be happy to answer that. So Connect program is confusing in the sense that what was Connect to begin with? What were we trying to do a couple of years ago when you passed money for 2 positions to start the Connect program over in the basement of the Oren King building? That actually happened. We started, once you provided the funding for those 2 positions, we advertised, and we started with our first worker back 2019, I believe. And so we were building, we were trying to understand, what the referrals were going to look like from the district attorney. We were building MOUs with as many nonprofit organizations as we could. That all was taking place, and that position has always been under Human Services, as well as the second Connect program that started last year as the caseloads rose. And we tried to get a caseload number up to 20 or more cases per worker, which we accomplished toward the tail end of 2019. And so in 2020, we added the second case manager at Connect, both of whom have worked consistently either in the basement of Oren King or over at our department in Oshkosh while the basement was being remodeled. There was a period of time where it was too dusty and services couldn't be provided in the Oren King basement level because of the construction. But all that whole time, Connect workers were connecting with referrals from the district attorney's office and connecting those people with the external services in the nonprofit world that you're talking about. So it's always been happening. It hasn't, right now we have about 25 cases in Connect and about another 25 active cases in 24/7 drug monitoring, which was a program that was brought over to be part of this in this current year. So those 2 staff are plenty busy at this point. And so what's happened is we talked about what was going to be the next step, and the next step is to try to address the need out there for specifically drug-dependent individuals who haven't been able to access our system or for whatever reason, had barriers to that. And so having a complement of staff in Orange King that is readily available from the courthouse to directly have people see these folks after they meet with either the district attorney's office or go to court. So that new staff complement is going to be essentially 4 people. One's going to be an AODA counselor, certified counselor that's going to be doing evaluations and counseling. We have a peer support specialist, someone who has lived experience as a recovering individual. They are going to be there and they are going to be having a caseload of individuals that they are going to be working with. We also are going to have a kind of combination receptionist, financial person, intake individual that will be kind of intaking people as they come in, scheduling, kind of a super support person, essentially. And then we're going to be moving over one of our supervisors from our department here and stationing them. Carol Morak will be stationed at Orange King because she will be supervising all those individuals and bringing over some of our safe streets, our drug court, and some other alternative programs, teen court. And those services are going to also be based out of Orange King as well. So there's going to be quite a complement of people that are going to be there at Orange King, and that in terms of none of those people are other than the 2 that are currently there. None of those people would start until probably the first of the year, and then we would be developing referral systems with the DA's office on how to make those connections to them, and always trying to expand our connections with the nonprofit groups, some of which are going to come into Orange King and donate services there, some of which we'll warm hand off with them in the community.
All right, thank you for that. I know that one challenge that we were looking at in regards to post-construction of the basement area of the Orange King building is partitions and walls, because obviously, you have a case where, it could be difficult where you have one person talking about their sexual assault case and on one end of the room, and then on the other end of the room, you get somebody talking about their breaking and entering case. So obviously that's going to be a challenge in regards to privacy. Is that a challenge going forward? Have you found a way to kind of work around that?
So it really depends on the timing on which the space at Orange King may or may not be available. So right now we're limited to the basement. And if we were limited to the basement for another year or 2, if construction isn't, if people aren't ready to move and things like that, we'll try to base out of the basement, and we will try to develop more partitions in the basement for privacy purposes, as you say. We definitely need to have every person's case be privately talked to with our staff. That's a necessity. So we'll probably need to have some temporary partitions and things erected if we're going to be operating out of the basement to begin with. But if we are also able to utilize first floor at some point, then we will make a decision with the district attorney's office on essentially who goes where. And how we'll divide up those 2 levels of spaces. And that's really not up to me, that's up to decisions that are made, by you all and by facilities.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Supervisor Defferting. Next, we'll go to Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank the Dr. Topple for his extensive explanation of the cash flowing through human services. And for years, I have been a critic of the large levies that are determined or seen 2 years after that levy was produced. The fact of the matter is that on page 402 of the 401 of the 2022 Human Services budget, the actual levy for the year 2020, 2 years passed, and the actual levy is listed as $12,183 and $12,183,045. And on page 393 of the 2020 budget, the executive adopted levy is $18,382,034. So there is still some $6 million disparity that exists, but I fully understand the dilemma that the department has in allocating monies according to the assessment of the needs and the uncertainty of what the returns will be after the state and the federal government decide what kind of money is paid out. So I just think it's important to realize there's still that disparity that's been there for a decade. A question that I have for Dr. Topol is one that I had asked yesterday to the clerk of courts. And I was told that Human Services would be the appropriate place to present this. Could you comment on what rental eviction assistance has been provided to Winnebago County residents? And does this appear to be a priority in our dispensing of the strategic application of CARES and ARPA funds?
Sure. The rental assistance funds through ARPA or previously CARES, a decision was made at the state of Wisconsin level that all of the rental assistance program would be run through the CAP agencies in the state of Wisconsin. The CAP agency is a community action program. In our case, our local CAP is called AdvoCap out of Fond du Lac, but it covers Fond du Lac, Winnebago, and Green Lake counties. And so the state of Wisconsin entered into a contract with AdvoCap to provide the rental assistance program for anybody in Winnebago County. I was not able to connect with AdvoCap this morning to find out the answer to that, but my last remembrance in talking with AdvoCap was that they had served hundreds of people. Did it get to 1,000? It may be well over that, but there were many people who requested help with rent over the course of the last year and a half and received hundreds of dollars in rental assistance for their needs. We in Winnebago County tried desperately to start a mortgage assistance program all through last year, and the Department of Administration kept delaying its answers to us about whether or not we could do it. We finally got permission to do it. I believe it was in October of last year when we finally got to do it. And we had until only the end of November. That was the latest that Wisconsin would allow us to run it because they had to submit a claim to the feds. So we literally had 6 to 8 weeks of time to try to get it up and running. We did help 4 or 5 families in that time. And our assistance was up to, I believe, $2,000 per situation, depending on what they were in arrears with their mortgage. And there were certain caveats to that. One was that they were in good standing prior to the pandemic, that they could prove that they had a loss in job status that compounded the situation for them and they were in arrears. And then we could work with them and their mortgage lender to help with some payments. So again, it was only because of a short period of time that we weren't able to assist them longer. I think just as we were ending, it was starting to catch on. And with any of these programs, it really takes a few months for the public to really understand who's going to help them with these assistance types things. But going back to your original question, Mr. Eisen, it's AdvoCap that continues to run the rental assistance program for Winnebago County. And I can try to get you numbers and send them to you by email to let you know.
Yeah, my particular concern was whether any of those dollars that have been distributed, the $16 million that has been distributed and the overall 33 million, none of that money will go to a rental assistance program.
No, the state of Wisconsin.
That's the nexus of my my inquiry. There wouldn't be a need to come up with the details of what's been distributed. I'm trying to look forward to see whether this is going to be one of those programs to look forward to in that strategic plan.
The short answer is no, we won't be adding that because that's already taken care of.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Bender, followed by Supervisor Schellinger. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
Hi, my question is, with the Connect program, would it be possible for you to run part of that out of the Oshkosh by Gosh building? By moving corporate counsel over there, I see her losing about an hour and a half a day in travel time. You know, she last night said that she thought she could make it in 7 to 8 minutes. I don't believe that's feasible to make it from her office up to the 5th floor of the courthouse in basically 7 or 8 minutes. You have the winter where you have snow. She could be cleaning off the car. You get in the parking lot 3 to 4 times a day. She's got to walk in and out of that building. There's a very good chance that somebody could slip, fall, and get hurt. You know, where with the Connect program, they're coming to the facility for a service. I mean, I would think maybe we could remodel the Carter part of the Oshkosh by Gosh building or something to make that work for that program. Would that be a possibility at all?
So the short answer is we can do it from anywhere. We could do it from our current Oshkosh Human Services building. We could do it at Carter. We could do it at a separate location. So for us, location isn't the issue. But what I want to say to you is that the need was expressed by the district attorney and by our county executive that the key to the success of this program is that the quickness of the ability of the person from meeting with the DA or being at the courthouse to being able to right then and there go and get the services in person. And that there is a belief, and this is true for some individuals, that if they have any delay in time to get connected to services, that they will choose to not go. And we've seen that in the mental health and substance use area over many, many years, is that sometimes you have to really strike when the iron is hot. And so the whole idea of why there and nowhere else is because that is where the people are ready to go. They accept that they need that help, and we don't want any kind of a delay in them turning around and getting in their car and going someplace else and going home and just avoiding it. So I think the key to this issue really is the speed at which we can get people connected. And the thought from both of them is that this is going to make or break the program. Because I originally said, you know, we can add more staff here at our Oshkosh building. It's literally about the same distance as the Carter building. I originally proposed that. But the feeling is that that's too long, that those minutes really do matter. If we're going to try to save out of those 38 people that committed or didn't commit suicide, but died by overdose, if we're going to make a dent in that, even if we can save a few people by having that quick response, it's worth it. So that's the point of why Oren King is really essential to making this work. But we're open to.
If you're using the basement for that, or what you're using right now, I can't believe that you're going to be using 2 floors every day for people that need service within 7 minutes. Because she said she thought she could go there in 7 minutes. So we're saying we're going to displace her because these people cannot wait 7 minutes. I mean, maybe it's true. You're up in that profession, but then if that is the case, we did tear down that house with the idea that we could always add on to the Oren King building. So then I think our best plan would be to spend a year adding on to the Oren King building and not making corporate counsel basically waste an hour and a half a day driving between buildings. And I know how the parking lots get in the winter. They're slippery, you know, and they're walking in and out of there basically 4 to 5 times a day, you know, and you, in your honest opinion, you believe that these people are going to basically commit suicide in 7 to 8 minutes after they leave that courthouse? They could not make it to the Oshkosh by Gosh building or to your facility because before they got there, they're going to kill themselves. In your honest opinion.
I believe that there will be a few. The whole bunch, I can't say that with absolute certainty, but I think a couple of people, a delay of 5 or 10 minutes may make the difference in whether they get service or they don't. And so here's what I'd like to say. If we can figure out a way where we can all be in close proximity to the courthouse, I'm all for that. You know, however that works, we'll be in the basement. I'm telling you this, we'll make the best use of the basement for as long as we need to, because we anticipate some time in remodeling and other things. So we're going to start out in the basement and try to make it work as best we can on January 1st.
So the district attorney is on the call. I think he wants to add to some of those comments. District Attorney Gossett, go ahead.
Thank you. So one of the big reasons that this has to take place in the Oren King building is also because the district attorney's office and DHS are partnering on this. And so the Oren King building is the only building in the county wired by the state for their computer system, and they won't wire another building. So in order for us to share services and share intelligence and share resources, it has to be in that building. And also, the County Executive Damel had asked me about a space for Corporation Counsel on days when they did have to be in court, because of course some of their obligations are in court, some of them are not. And we are able to make office space in the district attorney's office available to them as well to utilize.
Thank you, District Attorney Gossett.
If I could just add to that, I would like to see that the county exec come to the county board, and we should add on to the Oren King building, because there's no way we should be moving corporate counsel across town and making her lose an hour and a half worth of staff time per day traveling to the courthouse. I mean, it would be by far wiser. We tore that house down. That was the reason we tore the house down, because we thought if we ever needed to expand that Oren King building, we would go that way. So I just think the wisest thing we can do is keep them all in that location and move forward with the remodeling, adding on to the Oren King building, so we can accommodate everybody and not make corporate counsel basically go out in the winter and clean her car out 4 or 5 times a day so that she can go to court. You know, that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. We have a couple other call-ins. Next, I'll go to Supervisor Schellinger, followed by Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just have a couple of questions about the Connect program first as well. So I think I understand the, sort of how we are limited in making this all work, and how that would require placement at the Oren King building. I want to ask, I guess, if are all of the human services that the county offers going to be available at the Orrin King building, or are there some human services offerings that wouldn't be available there?
The answer is that none of this is going to change the services that are available in Oshkosh for substance abuse, mental health, crisis. The diversion programs, my understanding, will be primarily located out of Orrin King. But in terms of direct treatment, intervention, evaluation, support, information, and referral, that's all remaining at the Oshkosh building. We have 4 other AODA counselors. We have 1 or 2 other peer specialists. We've got a large number of crisis staff. So they're all still housed in the Oshkosh building and also in Neenah. That isn't going to change. These are additional people to that process.
Okay, so a person who enters the Connect program is going to receive some services in the Orrin King building, but also some services at Oshkosh or Neenah.
Or in the community. So if a person needs a service that we don't provide in the AODA continuum, there's halfway houses. There are direct treatment, 28-day programs. They are aftercare kinds of things. We don't provide those directly. We contract for those in the community. So those would still be, we would warm hand off those services back to those agencies. Or if the person needs more of a specialty, for instance, they need psychiatry, then that's in Oshkosh and that's in Neenah. So we would warm hand off that service back to our department.
Okay. Thank you. So I guess so you offer a lot of like services that if somebody comes in to interact with one facet, they may get walked down the hall to income maintenance and get support they need there. Are those functions going to be available to people participating in the Connect program in that same direct service, like point of contact, walk them down the hall, or are we going to be referring people to other buildings to complete sort of the I don't know if wraparound is the right word, but to me it's sort of like the fullness of what you offer in a right. in the existing paradigm.
Yeah, so we're really working on the idea of warm handoff. Warm handoff means we actually connect the person by not just saying, hey, here's a number, go call them, or here's an address, go there. That's a cold handoff. A warm handoff is when we actually make a connection with them in our room to call another person, to have them talk to that person, to if they have a question about how to get there, we may transport them from one location to another. So it's called a warm handoff because we don't want to lose the person between point A and point B. And that exists already in our department. If you came in, you were seeking a mental health service, but you need economic support, we're going to try to do that warm handoff as well with them, even if it just means going from one floor to another floor. So that's kind of the same idea, is that if people are capable and don't need help in getting from point A to point B, and we have a general belief that they can handle that, we're not going to do all of the steps. But if a person is really confused or has a history of dropping out from point A to point B, we're going to hand them off from point A to point B.
Okay. Are there resources in this budget to account for for any additional work that you're going to have to do, whether that be like the caseworker or whatever, like providing that transportation from one building to the other as opposed to walking down a flight of stairs, or anything like that? Or are we absorbing that within the existing source?
Yeah, the behavioral health division, which is mental health and substance abuse, is 90 of or actually over 100 of our 270 staff. It's a very large division, lots of money in there for transportation, for other services. We feel like as we start this up, we're going to get a sense of what the extra costs are. And next year, we're just going to absorb it. And if it turns out that it's too large of an absorption for 2023, we will probably break that out for you next year.
Okay. Okay, thanks. I'm going to move away from the Connect program a little bit now and talk about some of the other components of the budget. So in your intro, did you say something about like having 10% turnover in your staff? Okay.
Yeah, so 10% equals about 24 to 26, 27 individuals a year in turnover. And that's been pretty consistent over the last 5 years.
Okay, is that an increase from the previous 9 or 10 years that you had been here?
I think so. I mean, I didn't go back to see 2007. I think it's always averaged 15 to 20. So, being upwards of, 25 and a little higher, probably a little more is accounted, for from COVID, people making choices to either, maybe they want to work more from home. The reasons that people are leaving, certainly there's a group that are retiring. There's a group that is moving out of the locale. There's people that want to work less. Maybe they had a full-time job. They want to go to part-time. So they leave for that reason because we can't accommodate them. Some people have said, we just want to have more work from home, and you're not able to accommodate that. And lastly, we lose people to higher paying jobs. And I would say our number one nemesis, as my fellow department head talked about, Outagamie is a nemesis. Our number one nemesis is Outagamie County. If their salary and fringe actually edges a little bit higher than we are, we've lost probably the most people over the 14 years that I've been here to one county, Outagamie. So to the extent that we can have our salary and fringe package be as close to our neighbor as possible, the more we hopefully will lose people based on that difference. Now again, what percentage of that 10%, it's going to be somewhere between probably 3 to 5 that accounts for that particular aspect.
Okay. So in our budget book, 2021, your wages ended up being really close to what we adopted in our budget. So despite having 10% turnover, you kind of came in pretty, or looking like you're coming in pretty close. Can you speak to, like, are you able to turn those positions over more quickly than maybe we're seeing for other departments, or can you speak a little bit to how that is playing out for you?
Well, so it takes about 2 to 3 months from on turnover. So if somebody quits, gives us notice, it's probably 2 to 3 months before we're able to recruit. Our recruitment has been going down in terms of qualified applicants, just like many other areas have. Why the labor line stays about right is because we then have to pick up either additional overtime hours, or we sometimes are able to pick up a person who's maybe recently retired, or someone that we know of that can kind of temporarily fill in. We call them LTEs. And if we can take advantage of some LTEs, we'll do that as well. So our budget for labor tends to be pretty close.
Okay, thank you so much. Lastly, I want to talk about the contractual services. First off, has there been any change to the 2021 projections? I guess I'm specifically looking at the table on page 399 and 400. And it looks like, compared to 2018 through 2020, there's a significant dip in what we're projected for contractual services. I'm curious, one, if that still is sort of accurate. And then if you could comment, it kind of seems counterintuitive to me that in the midst of a pandemic, we would have a significant drop in sort of these demands on human services.
So I was trying to figure out the question. I think you just helped me understand it in your last sentence. And what happened during the pandemic with our contracted services, which it does seem counterintuitive that the need for contracted services or the utilization of them would go down during the pandemic. Number one answer is that our contracted agencies could not handle the pandemic as well as we would have hoped that they would have. Some of our contractors went out of business. some of our contractors limited hours. And so we spent less on contracted services because of those kinds of situations. We didn't stop contracting with people that we had before. We didn't limit contracts with people that we had before. It's simply, it was what happened during the pandemic and not being able to utilize them. And when you can't utilize them, then we don't provide them money for basically not being able to service our clients. What did we do? Instead, we basically stepped up our game and had our staff make many more contacts with our clients throughout the week, virtually, some in person, because I said that we need to keep more eyes on our clients now that we have less people working with them. And I can tell you, kudos to my staff. They stepped up and their hours of contact increased, as did their billing. So that's how we managed through the pandemic. I can tell you that we probably missed some things. My staff told me we missed some things that were going on with people that now we're kind of playing catch up a little bit with some of that this year. But overall, in terms of complaints or problems, there haven't been any greater number of concerns expressed to me for 2021 or 2020 that were in past years. So that's the answer to the contracted services.
Is that is some of that then like sort of maybe like latent services that are building up that when that capacity opens up, or if capacity opens up from partners that we sort of have a backlog of people who need to get into some of those programs?
In some cases, yes. In some cases, we establish small wait lists. I really do not like wait lists for services, but in some cases that's your last position is to have the. So when things opened up a little bit better earlier this year, and again this time things are kind of tightening up again because of the rise in COVID cases and the concerns there. But when things were looking a little bit better this summer, we were getting more requests for service. We were trying to gear up, and then what we try to do is transfer some additional monies as we need to into those programs to provide more service area there. So we do tweak contracts throughout the year based on the need.
Okay. Two more, I think, real quick questions I want to ask specifically about the adoption assessments. Went from a small $4,000 last year to zero this year. Can you talk about that program?
Hopefully some of my staff will know more about it than I do. They're on the line. I think it's that we didn't have to do them any longer. That the reason that we don't have anything in the budget, that there's another organization or another agency doing it. I don't know if Renee, if you know any more about that particular line, we can get back to you on that.
Yes, that's in a nutshell, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And then the other one I wanted to ask about is the contractual services for professional services looks like it's down quite a bit from what we spent in 2021, but also lower than we spent in the last couple of years. I'm wondering if there's a reason for that adjustment other than just sort of trying to reduce the overall amount.
I think it was an attempt as part of the overall reduction to try to cut back on contracted services. It's a risk. The last thing we're going to do is not provide services to people that need them, but it is possible that we may go over budget next year in that service line. But we did have to reduce a number of lines, and that was one of them.
Can you talk about then what are some of the items that are in that what are some of the services we're providing under professional services?
Sure. Supervised visitation. So when parents have their kids placed in foster care, we have to provide visitation for them. PSG provides a number of workers that monitor those supervised visits along with our social work staff. They also do something called in-home safety supports. And that is that their service basically operates anytime that we're not available, meaning usually 4:30 Monday through Friday and the weekends, where families need to be monitored. So they have a staff that basically goes around and checks on families different times of the night, different times of the weekend, to ensure that the kids are safe with their families. It's part of their safety plan. So it's an in-home safety service. They also do mentoring with our youth justice kids. These are kids that have committed small offenses and are on supervision, and they need mentoring and coaching about anger management, social skills. They do that. And the last thing the PSG does is they do something called family training, where when families need parenting skills, they have a group of individuals that go in and train families on appropriate parenting techniques. And so all of those things are done in conjunction with our staff, which we are too few to do all of those services ourselves.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time and the education today.
Sure.
Thank you, Supervisor Schellinger. It's a little before noon, and I think we ideally would want to complete the human services budget. I need to step away so that I can go talk with the high school students at the Youth Government Day. So I'm going to step aside and let Vice Chair Tom Egan take over, and thought being to be able to complete the human services budget. And then after that, depending on how long it goes, to take a lunch break with the goal, if we can restart again. I think we're probably gonna have to restart more closer to 1:30, but I'll let Vice Chair Egan decide that, depending on how long the human services budget goes here. So I'll turn it over to him, and I'll be back after the lunch break, after I've spoken with the students at Youth Government. So I'll turn it over to our Vice Chair.
Okay.
Would it be okay just to allow Chuck Fari to ask his question?
We're ready for him. Supervisor Fari?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. My question, Bill, is I want to go back to the Connect program a little bit.
Okay.
In your table of department staffing, I just need to clarify a few things. You have an increase of 7 people. Of those 7, how many are directly related to the Connect program?
3 are directly connected to Connect. 1 is indirectly connected to Connect. And the other 2, I think, are, well, take that back. 4 are directly connected to Connect, and 1 is indirectly, and 2 are some modifications in our table of organization here in Oshkosh.
Okay, so I have, what do we got? 6, 7 people that are involved in the Connect program?
Yes, AODA counselor, peer support specialist, financial/admin associate. The deputy division manager position is being added to the overall division because we're moving a supervisor, Carol Morak, over to the Connect program. So that left us to add another supervisory position, but we really do need an assistant division manager because the spread is very complex. It's 100+ people. And also, I think we changed the case managers in Connect from project to full-time for next year.
So we currently have 2 of those individuals housed at the basement of the Orr King building.
Correct.
So we need to find a space for 5 additional people. Is that correct?
Yes, and then there was also the need, so we also have in the design, there was the request made that other staff from Human Services that are related to diversion, meaning the drug court, Safe Streets, and teen court, there's a few more positions that the request was to also move them to the same location. So maybe that number, maybe three additional positions as well. Now, can that all happen at once? Probably not. But the main core is going to have to be the 2 case managers who are there now, plus the additional 3 or 4 that would need to be housed over there in January as a start.
Okay. My reference is to get to the where we're going to house these individuals for this program.
Yep.
And it appears to me that we're adding to staff, so you have to have more accommodation for that staff. And the district attorney has requested they be housed in the Orrin King building close to him and his offices. And he demonstrated there's some issue with technology that would require that need. However, I'm hearing that these individuals need to be very close to the courthouse because of pertinent personal needs of the people involved, the case individuals. So and obviously we're going to greatly inconvenience our current corp counsel. I mean, by moving her to a totally different location. Mr. Bender addressed that quite adequately, I think. The question I have is, how much space have you looked at to house these connect individuals in the courthouse itself?
I have not been asked to, nor have I looked at any space in the courthouse. So I honestly don't know what's available there. Obviously we could take a look at that. I just don't know. We have a need for a lot of individual office space. And I think that might be tricky in the courthouse because I think there might be some larger open spaces, but I don't know how many like individual office units might be available at the courthouse.
Well, we certainly could remodel it. I mean, I really think we need to look at that because as I listened to the debate and suggestions here, that would solve those problems and perhaps keep our court counsel in our current location. So I would suggest that be reviewed as soon as possible. Perhaps Mr. Elder can address this later on as we go forward, but yeah, this moving around, I'm as concerned about it as Mr. Bender is, perhaps for different reasons, but I really see some issues here. And I might add, it was discussed last year about moving the corp counsel. And I thought the disposition of the board at that time, the last budget, was to keep her where she was. At that time, you had a different county executive, etc. So now we have a new county executive and a new direction, but I must differ with moving corp counsel out of her current location if there is an alternative that has not been explored.
Supervisor Egan, may I comment to that?
Yes, me, County Executive Damel.
All right. One of the things we actually looked at is being able to move corporation counsel right into the courthouse. Ideally, that's where it would go, and the 5th floor of the courthouse, or find room for them there. And in a perfect world, I think that would be the best fit. One of the things that we're going to have to come to reality is the Orrin King building is getting very old, and eventually we're going to have to stick a lot of money into that thing, or it's going to have to come down. It's going to have to be rebuilt anyway. And I would predict within the next 20 years, everyone's going to be moving out of that building one way or the other.
Thank you, County Executive Damel. Thank you, Supervisor Fari. I am up next, but I will call on Supervisor Eisen to go next.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I'm coming in with a perspective of tough love. I've always had this attitude towards the issue. And in this case, I have to agree with Supervisor Fari, and in particular, Supervisor Bender. It would seem to me that the solution to the district attorney's space issue sits on Algoma Boulevard, and that an extension, an addition to the Orrin King building would be an appropriate approach. And that add-on is at a 2% mortgage. We can't really afford not to do that. And the work that the Corporation Council does at the courthouse is so important that her office needs to stay there, either in the courthouse or at Orrin King as it has been. We'll get over this tough love when the new building is constructed. And then we can go on with the business of diverting our citizens from incarceration to rehabilitation. But we need to remember that the Corporation Council not only deals with the courthouse activities, the court appearances, the arbitration sessions, but she also deals, the Corporation Council also deals with the county board supervisors. The Corporation Council is our attorney, and it's our responsibility to see that the Corporation Council staff is serviced and respected and promoted as in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. I just have a little bit to say. It's been covered very well here. You know, the majority of us all were through this last year about moving corporate counsel out, and no way it went overwhelmingly that she shouldn't be moved out, her and her staff. I don't know why we're going through this again. I know our DA, he wanted to move her in the worst way at that time, and it was voted down, and he's still down below, he's shaking his head no. But why don't we go with this program up on the 5th floor? You know, I don't know how many of you have been up there. There's room, and if there's room for the whole, the other ones for Mary Ann and hers, why don't they move that up there? That's right in the courthouse and everything. Why do they have to move? Why don't they move the program up on the 5th floor? I know Attorney Gossett there said that, well, because of the wiring or whatever, it can't be done at the courthouse. I mean, if they remodel, it's going to cost more than I would think getting someone to rewire something or another. I'm going to let Attorney Gossett answer that because he said that they can't be rewired, and I don't know why.
Yeah, so the state district attorney IT program does the wiring. So they wire DA's offices, and Connect is not part of the DA's office. But I would like to go back to, I think there's a couple of things that might not be completely correct, right? So this was started as an alternative to an $18.1 million jail expansion, right? And yeah, in the
Order,
idea,
Mr. Point of order. This is supposed to be about the human services budget. Are we going to re-adjudicate the moving or not moving of the core council during this conversation?
No, we are not going to be talking about moving of the corp council. We just brought that up because that was part of it. Because that's either going in there or not.
Chairman Egan, did you still want me to respond?
You can just.
Okay. And so what we did was the former county executive was opposed to the space. The county board saved the Connect program and said, let's get it started. So we piloted it, and we've kind of been doing it piecemeal with the idea that if we could show that it was working, we could pull it all together and expand it to its original goals and its original inception. I think you've all just heard that the jail population was about 330 at the time, average daily population. We're sitting at about 190. Our overdose deaths last year hit 37. Our suicides hit 25. We're at 32 and 18 year to date so far this year. There is nothing more pressing right now, in my opinion, than addressing.
Getting way out, Attorney Gossett. We'll stick somewhat on this here. You're getting way out on what you're talking about.
So I guess the original idea was to get the program started and show that it could work and then expand it. I think we're there, right? We've reduced the jail population as we indicated. We're ready to bring in these services. So that's where we are. And to make it work, we have to utilize that space. There is space in the courthouse available, but it wouldn't work for the Connect program. So we do have options to provide space for Corporation Counsel near the courthouse when they need that. And those were taken into consideration and accounted for, I believe, by the county executive in his discussions with everybody.
Anyone else? I just think I'm going to remind you what was decided last year and what gone from there. No one else. I see no other. Oh, yes. Supervisor Bender.
I guess I would be curious how we go about adding an addition onto the Orange King building through the budget. The only way to stop this from happening, I would assume, is to take the money out of the budget so they can't remodel it, the Orange King building, and then add money into the budget to add an addition onto the Orange King building. I guess I'm looking for guidance there from somebody.
Superfari, did you have something on that? Else?
Well, I have more of a request for when we return after lunch.
Okay.
Do I have the floor, sir?
Yes, sir.
I think after we return from lunch, before we move on to the next department, I would request that Mr. Elder, who is the facilities director for this county, address the concerns that have been raised, specifically adding on to the Orange King building or remodeling the 5th floor and keeping Corp Counsel within the courthouse itself, or other options perhaps for Connect in the courthouse. I need to understand what options are available and they're not being presented. That's my question. Can we do that?
You can come on. If we don't adjourn completely, this can be brought back up here if we just say that we'll come back on this issue.
So move to do that, and then I move for adjournment for lunch.
David Albrecht, I would like to, I've been trying to get on to comment, but for some reason I keep getting kicked off. I would like to see that
I'm sorry, I don't see your light, but I'm sorry, David.
Anyways, I would like to see us stay, have the Corporation Counsel stay in the Orange King building. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Sniper District 35. I second Chuck Fari's motion.
Thank you.
There was a motion made and seconded to go ahead and leave this part open and come back and reconvene talking about this, and to have someone call Mr. Elder and have him come on. I don't see him on. No, I don't see him on at this time.
Yeah, where is he? There he is.
He's there. Where am I missing him?
I'll be there in a minute.
He's there.
When they're looking for him. You see him?
That's all right. There you go. Yeah, they always bounce around right there. He's unmuted. Yeah. I think he has to unmute, but they have to unmute him too downstairs. If they didn't make him a call, something like that.
Mr. Elder, are you on?
Those are co-passes.
Yes, I'm on.
There we go.
Okay, there's a motion made and seconded to go ahead and close this part. Is it okay with Mr. Fari as long as he's on that we talk about this now?
Actually, I would prefer to do that after we reconvene at 1:30.
Okay, Mr. Elder, can you be back at 1:30 and beyond?
I will be back at 1:30.
Okay, there was a motion made and seconded to adjourn until 1:30, and Mr. Elder will be back on. We'll continue on with this discussion. All those in favor, thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Carried.